My sister told my husband. She married you for money. An hour later my dad said, divorce her. By nightfall, her lie exposed. She loved his brother. She replied, what? I nearly rear-ended the car in front of me. My husband Ethan's voice was steady, but I could hear his anger underneath. Your sister just told me that you only married me for the money. She said, you never loved me, and I was just a paycheck to you. My hand was shaking so much that I had to pull into a parking lot. Ethan, you are aware that this is not true. I understand, Lauren. I understand. I am not calling because I believe her. I'm calling because of what she said as she left. I didn't think things could get worse, but he was about to prove me wrong. What exactly did she say? She said, your parents deserve to know what kind of daughter they raised. She promised to go over there right now and tell them the truth about you. I had already pulled back onto the road, cutting off a minivan. My parents, specifically my mother, with whom I had spent years rebuilding a relationship following the chaos of my childhood. Last Christmas, my father finally told me that he was proud of the woman I had become. Savannah was about to walk into their house and tell them their daughter was a fraud, a gold digger, and that everything I'd built was a lie, including the degree I worked 4 jobs to pay for, the career I built from nothing, and the marriage I treasured. How long ago did she leave? 7 minutes. Perhaps 12. Their house was 24 minutes from Ethan's office and 17 from where I was now. If I passed every yellow light, I pressed the gas harder. I'm going to beat her there. Lauren, I have to be there first. I have to. My voice cracked, and I despised it. I will meet you there. Ethan stated. I'm leaving now. I hung up and drove. I beat Savannah by about 5 minutes. When I pulled into my parents' driveway and saw that her car hadn't arrived yet, I nearly collapsed with relief. I had just enough time to warn them and get ahead of whatever she had planned to say. I walked through the front door to find my parents in the kitchen. Dad was reading something from his tablet. Mom was wiping down the counter even though it was already clean, which indicated that she was concerned about something. They both looked up as I walked in, and I could see the surprise on their faces. I never simply showed up like this anymore. Lauren. Mom put down her rag. What are you doing here? I took a breath. I needed to remain calm. I needed to be strategic. Something happened between Savannah and Ethan. I wanted to talk with you before. Mom's expression changed immediately. Her eyes hardened, and her mouth formed the thin line I remembered from childhood. What did you do to make her upset? I blinked. I didn't, and I'm trying to tell you. Dad sighed and put down his tablet. Here we go. What is it this time? I hadn't even finished one sentence. I hadn't even reached the point. And I was already a defendant. Already I was the problem. I felt something cold settle into my stomach. 22 years had passed, and nothing had changed. Savannah was upset in this house, and Lauren was to blame. That was the rule. This had always been the rule. I opened my mouth to try again, but the front door opened, and Savannah entered. She cried and shook. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, and her hands trembled as she clutched her purse to her chest like a shield. The performance was perfect. Mom rushed over immediately. Savannah, honey, what is wrong? What happened? She wrapped her arms around her and led her to the kitchen table, giving me a look over her shoulder as if I'd done something. Like whatever happened had to be my fault. Dad stood up and hovered nearby, his face creased in concern. Are you okay, sweetheart? Do you need some water? Sit down. Sit down. I attempted to interject. Let me finish what I said. Mom turned around. Can't you see how upset she is? Stop obsessing over yourself for once. She might as well have punched me. I stood there with my mouth open, watching my parents fuss over Savannah, getting her water, rubbing her back and murmuring comfort. Savannah sat there soaking it all in, tears streaming down her cheeks, looking so fragile and wounded that you could have mistaken her for dead. Finally she took a shaky breath and looked up at our parents through wet, red-rimmed eyes. I didn't want to say anything, she admitted, her voice small and broken. I've been carrying this for so long, and I can't anymore. Mom squeezed her hand. You can tell us anything, sweetheart. Whatever it is, we are here. Savannah gave me a quick glance and I saw something cold and satisfied behind her tears. Then she turned back to our parents. Lauren informed me that she only married Ethan for his money. She laughed about it and said she'd finally gotten out. She wiped her face and her voice broke perfectly. I did not want to believe it either. I'd never heard silence so loud. I watched my parents' expressions change. I watched them stare at me as if I were a stranger, as if I was exactly who they had suspected I was. That's a lie, I replied. My voice came out harsher than I intended. That is a complete lie. I never said that. I have never said anything like that. Savannah shook her head sadly. I didn't want to believe it either, Lauren. But you mentioned it. You laughed at how easy it was to make him fall for you. You claimed you'd never have to worry about money again. That never occurred. I was almost shouting now. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling. Look at my bank account. This is money I saved before meeting Ethan. 4 jobs during college. I paid off my student loans myself. This is my salary from my job, which I earned on my own merit. I pushed the phone toward my mother. Look at this. I built it myself. I don't need anybody's money. Mom did not even glance at the screen. She simply looked at me with tired disappointment, as if I were a child attempting to lie my way out of trouble. Dad waved his hand dismissively. Anyone can create a fake number. You were always good at portraying yourself as the victim. The words made me physically ill. I had receipts. I had proof. They didn't matter. They didn't matter because my parents had already decided on their beliefs. They made a decision before I walked through the door. The front door opened again, and Ethan entered. He must have broken every speed limit to get here so quickly. He took in the scene quickly. Savannah was crying at the table, with my parents hovering over her. And I was standing alone with my phone in hand, his jaw clenched. He walked up to me and placed his hand on my back. I arrived as quickly as I could. What did I miss? Savannah told them, I married you for your money, I explained. She claims I confessed it to her and laughed about it. Ethan's face became hard. He turned to face my parents. That is insane. I have been married to Lauren for 4 years. I saw her stress over her own bills. I saw her refuse to let me help her pay off her student loans. She insisted on dividing everything evenly, even though I told her she didn't have to. She has never asked me for money. Not once. Mom shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with pity. She has you fooled, sweetheart. She's good at it. Ethan stared at her. I apologize. What? Dad stood up from the table and approached my husband. He did not even look at me. It was as if I wasn't in the room anymore. Son, I am going to give you some advice. Divorce her. Get out while you can, before she bleeds you dry. I stepped between them, physically placed my body between my father and my husband. Stop. You can't talk to my husband about my marriage as if I'm not standing here. This is my life. He knows me better than you ever have. Dad stared at Ethan as if I hadn't said anything, like I was furniture. She did it to us too. He said she made us believe she had changed. We assumed she had outgrown all of her childhood drama. But people do not change. Not really. I felt a shift inside me. Something that had been holding on for years has finally let go. Drama, I reiterated. Is that what you call it? Mom's face tightened. Lauren, don't start. No, I'd like to understand. Mom, what drama are you talking about? What did I do that was so unforgivable? Mom got up from the table. Her voice was quiet, which made matters worse. Do you remember what I am talking about? When you were 17, you stood in our kitchen, looked at me and your father, and said, "You're bad parents. You don't know how to raise children." She let it sit. The words hung in the air, like smoke. "We forgive you for that," she added. "We welcomed you back into the family. We were proud of you as we watched you build your own little life. And now I discover you've been lying to that man since the day you met him." She shakes her head. "You always had to turn everything into a catastrophe. Couldn't simply be a part of this family without tearing it apart. You had to drag everyone through your drama and pretend like you were the only one suffering." She looked at Ethan. "Now she is doing the same thing to you." I stood there and allowed the words to wash over me. Something clicked into place. Something I should have seen years ago. These weren't parents who got fooled by Savannah. These weren't parents who were confused or misled. These were parents who had been waiting for permission to stop pretending they'd forgiven me. Waiting for an excuse to go back to treating me like the problem child. The difficult one. The daughter who saw too clearly and said too much. Savannah didn't trick them. She just gave them the key to a door they'd been standing in front of for 22 years. I took Ethan's hand. We're leaving. I walked toward the front door, but I stopped in front of Savannah. She looked up at me with those tear-stained cheeks and that wounded expression that I now knew was pure performance. I kept my voice low, calm, cold. I don't know why you're doing this, Savannah, but I'm going to find out. Her eyes went wide, her jaw clenched. A bead of sweat formed at her hairline. For just a second the mask slipped, and I saw something underneath. Fear. Real fear. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I saw it, and I was going to find out what she was hiding. I walked out of my parents' house with my husband beside me. Behind us, I could hear my mother calling my name, telling me I was being dramatic, telling me I was proving her point. I didn't look back. The relationship I'd spent years rebuilding was ash. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. Savannah had something to hide. Something that scared her enough to make her destroy my life, just to keep it buried. And I was going to dig until I found it. The car was silent for the first 6 minutes. I couldn't stop shaking. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jumping. He was the first one to speak. They didn't even look at the bank statements. His voice was low and hard. Your mother didn't glance at the screen. Your father waved it off like you were showing him a coupon. They didn't want to know the truth, Lauren. They wanted permission to treat you like garbage again. And Savannah handed it to them on a silver platter. I pressed my palms against my eyes. I could still hear my mother's voice. You're bad parents. You don't know how to raise kids. 22 years, and she'd been saving that, waiting to throw it back in my face. And Savannah, Ethan continued, his anger building, crying on cue, shaking like a leaf. That was a performance. I've seen better acting in car commercials. She had that lie ready. She practiced it. She knew exactly what she was going to say, and exactly how she was going to say it. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel. What kind of person does that to their own sister? I didn't have an answer. That was the part I couldn't wrap my head around. Savannah and I weren't best friends, but we were family. We had history. I'd held her hair back when she got food poisoning at her bachelorette party. I'd helped her pick out her wedding dress. I'd shown up for every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. And she repaid me by trying to blow up my marriage and turn my parents against me. But why? I said out loud. What does she gain from this? Even if my parents believe her, even if she destroys my reputation with them, what does she get? Ethan was quiet for a second, then he glanced at me. I've been thinking about that, and there's something I never told you because I thought I was imagining it. I looked at him. The way Savannah acts around Carter, Mason's brother. He glanced at me to make sure I was following. Mason was Savannah's husband. I've noticed it for a while. She's different when he's in the room. She finds reasons to sit next to him. She laughs too hard at his jokes. She's always volunteering to help him with stuff. I frowned. Carter. I barely know him. He's at family stuff sometimes, but we've never really talked. Ethan nodded. Exactly. You barely notice him. But Savannah, she notices every time he walks through a door. I've seen it at barbecues, at holiday dinners, at Mason's birthday last year. The second Carter shows up, Savannah transforms. She's louder, more animated. She touches her hair more. He shook his head. I told myself I was reading into it, but after today, I don't think I was. I sat with that for a moment. Savannah and Carter. It didn't make sense. Savannah was married to Mason. She'd been married to Mason for years. They had a house together, a life together. You think she's capable of cheating? I asked. Ethan scoffed. After what I just watched her do to you? I think she's capable of anything. He reached over and took my hand. His grip was firm, steady. We're going to figure out what she's hiding together. Whatever game she's playing, we're going to find out the rules. I squeezed his hand back. Okay, let's start with Mason. We pulled up to Mason and Savannah's house 24 minutes later. The lights were on downstairs. Mason's truck was in the driveway, and Savannah's car was gone. She was probably still at my parents' house, basking in her victory. How do you want to play this? Ethan asked, putting the car in park. Careful. I don't want to blow up his life until we know what we're dealing with. Got it. I'll follow your lead, but if he knows something, I'm pushing. We walked up to the front door and I knocked. Mason answered in a t-shirt and sweatpants, a beer in one hand and confusion all over his face. Lauren. Ethan. He looked between us. What are you guys doing here? I kept my voice light. We were in the area, thought we'd stop by. Is Savannah home? No, she went to your parents' place a few hours ago. Said something about needing to talk to them about. He stopped. Studied my face. What's happening? Ethan stepped in. Can we come in? We need to talk. Mason's confusion grew, but he moved aside. We followed him into the living room and sat on the couch while he settled into the armchair across from us. You're scaring me, Mason said. Is anyone hurt? Is this Savannah? Savannah's fine, I said. At least physically, but something happened today and we're trying to figure it out. We hoped you could help us. Mason took a long drink from his beer. Can I help you? How? Ethan leaned forwards. How are things between you and Savannah? Honestly, Mason replied with a hollow laugh. That is a loaded question. He looked down at the bottle in his hands. Things are. I do not know. Fine. I suppose we're fine. Fine does not sound fine, Ethan said. Mason remained quiet for a moment. She has been different for years. I don't know how to describe it. Sometimes I feel as if I'm living with a roommate rather than a wife. She's always somewhere else in her mind. Even though she's sitting right next to me, she's not really present. How are they different? I asked gently. Distant. Checked out. He shrugged. I try to plan date nights, but she always finds a reason to cancel. I suggest a weekend trip and she gets a headache, is too tired, or something happened at work. I ask her if she's happy, and she says yes, but it doesn't show in her eyes. He had another drink. I keep thinking I'm doing something wrong, like I'm not exciting enough, successful enough or whatever, but I don't know how to fix something if I don't even know what's broken. My chest tightened. Mason was a good man, kind, and loyal, and he had spent years blaming himself for something that was never his fault. When did it start? Ethan asked. The distance. Mason thought about it. I do not know. It's difficult to pinpoint. Perhaps it was always there, and I just didn't notice at first. He paused and frowned. Actually, this is not true. She was different at first, warmer, and more present, but then something changed, and she retreated completely. He fell silent, his eyes unfocused as if he were scrolling through memories, looking for a pattern he had missed. Then his expression changed. Do you know what's weird? Mason spoke slowly. She's not like that with Carter. Ethan and I both remained still. What do you mean? Ethan inquired carefully. My brother, when Carter is around, she is, I'm not sure, alive. That's the only word for it. Mason shook his head, as if he hadn't heard himself before. She laughs and talks more. She remembers every detail about his life, including his job, hobbies, and schedule. She insisted on driving 3 hours to his housewarming party last spring, despite my work deadline. However, when my college friend came to town, she developed a migraine and was unable to attend dinner. He put down his beer and rubbed his face with both hands. I'd never thought about it like this before. But when Carter needs help with something, she's in the car before I can finish my sentence. When I need help with something, she has 100 excuses. Ethan looked at me. I gave him a little nod. Mason, Ethan said. Has Savannah ever spoken about her feelings for Carter? Anything that felt more than simply being a good sister-in-law? Mason's face hardened. What are you asking me? We ask because... No. Mason stood up so quickly that his chair scraped against the floor. No, you cannot come into my home and inquire about my marriage, only to imply that my wife has feelings for my brother. That is insane. Savannah is many things, but she isn't. She would not. He was pacing and running his hands through his hair. You are wrong. Whatever you think, you're mistaken. Savannah loves me. She married me. We live a life together. 7 years. 7 years of marriage, and you're going to tell me she's been pining for Carter the entire time. That is crazy. That's absolutely insane. Mason and Ethan started. And even if she did have something for him, which she does not, what is the point? Why are you here? Why are you asking me this? His voice crackled. What happened today that prompted you to drive to my house and blow up my entire life? I stood up gently. Mason, please sit down. We need to tell you what happened. Then tell me. He started shouting now. Stop dancing around the issue and simply say it. Savannah went to Ethan today, I said, maintaining a steady voice. She told him that I married him for his money. She said I confessed to her. That I laughed when I finally made it out. Mason froze. What? It is a lie, all of it. I never said that. I've never considered it. Savannah told Ethan, and then she told my parents the same thing. My voice wavered, but I pressed on. My parents believed her. They told Ethan to divorce me. They claimed I had been deceiving everyone for years. Your wife walked into my parents' house, crying and shaking, and gave a performance that destroyed my relationship with my family in 24 minutes. Mason's face turned white. No, that is not true. Savannah would not. We watched her do it, Ethan said, sobbing on cue and trembling like a victim. She had everything rehearsed. She knew exactly what to say and how to deliver it. Mason lowered himself back into the chair, as if his legs couldn't support him anymore. He stared at the floor. Why? He finally spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. Why would she do that? That's what we're trying to figure out, I explained. That is why we are here. That is why we asked about Carter, because we don't understand why Savannah would try to end my marriage unless there's something else going on that we can't see. Mason remained quiet for a long time. He looked up, and his eyes were wet. Mason abruptly stated, I'm coming with you. I will accompany you wherever you go next. Ethan shakes his head. I do not think that is a good idea. Not yet. If Savannah returns home and you are not present, she will notice something is wrong. We need you to behave normally until we figure out what we're dealing with. Mason became angry. So I am supposed to sit here and pretend everything is fine. Assume my wife did not just try to blow up my sister-in-law's life. For the time being, I said. Only for now. We'll tell you everything we find out. I promise. Mason stared at the wall. The silence was so long that I thought he wouldn't respond. Then he looked at me with hollow eyes. Lost. I don't even know who I'm married to, he said quietly. I thought I did, but I don't. We left Mason's house in silence. I kept seeing his face, the confusion turning to anger, then to something worse. That hollow look in his eyes when he said he had no idea who he was married to. That was brutal, Ethan admitted finally. He knew nothing about any of it. He knew there was something wrong. I explained that he simply couldn't name it. Carter has noticed all of the things he mentioned, including the distance, the canceled plans, and the way she lights up around him for years. He simply didn't want to know what it meant. And now we've handed him a box full of evidence and asked him to look. Ethan looked at me. But we still don't know why. We know Savannah has a relationship with Carter, or at least she thinks she does. We know her marriage is hollow. But what does any of this have to do with you? That's why we need to speak with Carter. Carter lived in an apartment complex approximately 17 minutes away. Ethan called him on the way saying we needed to discuss something important. Carter sounded perplexed, but agreed to meet us. He buzzed us and greeted us at his door with a puzzled look. Lauren. Ethan. He shook Ethan's hand and offered me an awkward half-hug. This is unexpected. Is everything okay? His apartment was clean and simple. Bachelor furniture, a gaming setup in the corner. He offered us water and sat down across from us looking genuinely lost. So, what's going on? You sounded serious on the phone. Ethan didn't waste time. We need to ask you about Savannah. Carter's eyebrows shot up. Savannah. What about her? How did you two meet? I asked. Carter looked surprised by the question. Savannah. We met years ago, before she and Mason got together actually. We worked at the same company for a few months. We'd grab lunch sometimes, talk in the break room. She was cool. He shrugged. Then I introduced her to Mason at a company happy hour and they hit it off. Rest is history. Ethan and I exchanged a look. So you knew her first? Ethan said slowly. And then you introduced her to your brother. Yeah. I thought they'd be good together. Mason was going through a dry spell and Savannah was single and seemed like his type. Carter smiled at the memory. Honestly, I felt like a pretty good matchmaker when they started dating. 7 years married now. I take full credit. The smile faded when he saw our faces. Why? What's going on, Carter? Ethan said directly. Does Savannah have feelings for you? Carter's face went through 40 different moods all at once. Confusion, then discomfort, then something that looked like recognition he'd been avoiding. There have been moments, he admitted slowly. Things I brushed off. The way she hugs me too long. The way she always sits next to me at dinners. The way she looks at me sometimes. He shook his head. But she's married to my brother. Why would she marry Mason if she... He stopped, and that's when it hit me. The timeline. Carter met Savannah first. They worked together, had lunch together. Then he introduced her to Mason and she married him anyway. Oh my God, I said quietly. She married Mason to stay close to you. The words came out like I was hearing them for the first time myself. Because I was. Carter's face went through something ugly. First confusion, then understanding, then disgust. That's sick. That's my brother. She's been married to my brother for 7 years. She's been sleeping in his bed, eating dinner with him, being his wife. His voice crackled. And the whole time she was what? Waiting. Waiting for me to notice her. Waiting for me to make a move. He stood up and paced across the room. I introduced them. I set them up. I thought I was doing something good and she used it. She used Mason to get to me. She's been playing both of us this entire time. He turned back to us, his face red. Does Mason know? Does he know his wife married him because she couldn't have me? We just came from his house. Ethan said he knows something's wrong. He doesn't know all of it yet. Carter let out a sound that was half laugh, half groan. 7 years. 7 years of holidays and birthdays and family dinners, and she's been sitting there thinking about me while my brother holds her hand. He looked physically ill. That's disgusting. That's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. We couldn't console him no matter how hard we tried. We just had to let him process it all on his own. We left Carter's apartment with the picture almost complete. In the car, Ethan was quiet for a minute. Then he said, So Savannah's been in love with Carter for years. She married Mason to stay close to him. Carter never felt the same way. Her whole marriage is a lie. And she's miserable, I added. Mason said she's been distant for years. Checked out. She's trapped in a life she never wanted, waiting for a man who's never going to want her back. Ethan nodded slowly. Then he looked at me. But you're not. I frowned. What? You're not trapped. You're not miserable. You didn't marry me for access to someone else. His voice was careful, like he was working something out. You married me because you love me and we're actually happy. She can't stand it, I said slowly. She's been living a lie for 7 years, watching Carter not want her. Stuck in a marriage that means nothing. And then she looks at me and you and sees everything she doesn't have. Ethan finished. Real love, a real marriage. Happiness she'll never get. Because the man she wants doesn't even see her. We sat with that for a moment. I could feel the shape of it now. The why. It was right there, just out of reach. I think I understand, I said quietly. But I need to hear her say it. Ethan looked at me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to have a conversation with my sister. I pulled out my phone and texted Mason. Is Savannah home yet? The response came back in seconds. Yeah, just got back. Why? I typed back. We know why she lied. We're coming over. Ethan glanced at me as he started the car. You sure you want to do this tonight? I've never been more sure of anything. The drive to Mason's house felt shorter than before. Maybe because I knew exactly what I was walking into this time. No more confusion, no more questions, just answers I was going to drag out of my sister whether she wanted to give them or not. Mason opened the door before we even knocked. His face was tight, jaw clenched. He'd been waiting. She's in the living room, he said quietly. She doesn't know you're coming. Good. I walked past him into the house. Savannah was on the couch, shoes off, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world, like she hadn't just blown up my entire life a few hours ago. She looked up when I walked in, and her face shifted. Surprise first, then something that looked almost like amusement. Lauren couldn't stay away. She set her phone down and crossed her arms. Let me guess, you came to tell me I'm wrong, to explain yourself, to beg me to take it back. She shook her head with this little smile. It won't work. Mom and Dad know the truth now. Everyone knows. You're right, I said. Everyone's about to know the truth. Something flickered across her face. Ethan came in behind me and stood by the door. Mason moved into the room and positioned himself where he could see both of us. Savannah looked between us and her smile faltered. What's this? This is me telling you what I know. I kept my voice calm, steady. You knew Carter first. You worked at the same company. You grabbed lunch together, talked in the break room. You had feelings for him. Savannah's face changed. The amusement drained out of it. What exactly are you talking about? Carter introduced you to Mason, his brother, and you married Mason anyway. I watched her carefully. You married him to stay close to Carter. That's insane, Savannah said, but her voice had gone thin. That's absolutely insane. I married Mason because I love him. You've been distant for years, Mason said from across the room. His voice was quiet, but it cut through everything. You cancel every date night. You're never present. But when Carter needs something, you're out the door before I finish my sentence. Savannah whipped around to face him. Mason, you can't possibly believe. I asked you once if you were happy, Mason continued. You said yes, but it never reached your eyes. I thought I was the problem. I thought I wasn't enough. Turns out I was never even the point. That's not true. Savannah stood up. I adore you, I married you. I've been with you for 7 years. 7 years of sitting next to Carter at every dinner, I said. 7 years of remembering his birthday, his hobbies, his schedule. 7 years of driving 3 hours to his housewarming party while Mason had a work deadline. 7 years of waiting for him to notice you. Savannah's eyes were wild now, darting between me and Mason and Ethan, looking for an exit that wasn't there. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. I was just being a good sister-in-law. Say it, Savannah. My voice was hard. Tell Mason why you really married him. Tell him what you've been waiting for. I haven't been waiting for anything. Her voice pitched higher. This is ridiculous. You're all insane. I'm a good wife. I've been a good wife for 7 years. Then why does Carter have 300+ texts from you? Ethan asked. Random articles. Checking in. Remembering every detail of his life. Because I'm friendly. Because I'm a good sister-in-law. Is that a crime now? You helped him move, I said. You bought him gifts. You drove 3 hours to his housewarming. So what? Savannah was pacing now, her hands shaking. So what if I'm nice to him? So what if I show up for family? That doesn't mean anything. You hug him too long, Mason said quietly. You always sit next to him. You light up when he walks in the room. I've seen it for years. I just didn't want to believe it. Mason, stop. Savannah spun toward him, her eyes wild. You're letting them poison you against me. They're lying. Lauren's always been jealous of me. She's always wanted to tear me down. Jealous of what? I stepped closer to her. Your hollow marriage? Your checked-out husband? The man you've been waiting 7 years for who doesn't even know you exist. Shut up. Savannah's face was red now, tears streaming. You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I was in her face now. Explain why you married Mason. Explain why you've been obsessing over Carter. Explain why you tried to destroy my life today. I wasn't trying to destroy your life. You told my husband I married him for money. You told my parents. You stood in their kitchen crying fake tears, and you lied. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Savannah was backing up, her hands pulling at her hair. None of this was supposed to happen. I just wanted. What? Mason's voice boomed through the room. What did you want, Savannah? What have you been wanting for 7 years while I've been killing myself trying to make you happy? Savannah was cornered against the wall now, her chest heaving, her eyes darting between all of us like a trapped animal. You don't understand. None of you understand. I tried to love you, Mason. I really tried, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about who, Mason demanded. I didn't mean for it to be like this. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her face, snot dripping from her nose. I thought it would go away. I thought if I just stayed close enough, if I was patient enough, he would finally see me. Who? Savannah. I grabbed her shoulders. Say his name. Say it. I can't. Say it. Because I love him. The words exploded out of her like she'd been holding them in for years. Because she had. I love Carter. I've always loved Carter. From the first day I met him, I knew he was the one. And then he introduced me to Mason, and I thought if I was close enough, if I was part of his family, he would realize we were meant to be together. The room fell completely quiet. Savannah's chest was heaving. Her face was red, and tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she looked like someone who had just watched her whole life collapse. Because she had. Mason made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Savannah spun toward him, reaching out. Mason, I didn't mean. It's not what you think. You just said you love my brother. Mason's voice was barely a whisper. You've been married to me for 7 years, and you just said you love my brother. I love you too. I love both of you. It's complicated. It's not complicated. Mason stepped back from her. You married me to get close to him. That's what they're saying. And you just confirmed it. Savannah was sobbing now. I thought if I was around him enough, if I was part of his family, he would see me. He would realize we were meant to be together. I just needed more time. 7 years. Mason's voice cracked. You needed 7 years of my life, of our marriage, of me thinking something was wrong with me. He turned away from her like he couldn't stand to look at her anymore. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was sick. And I still needed one more answer. Why me, Savannah? She looked at me through her tears, mascara running down her face just like it had at our parents' house. But this time it was real. Why go after my marriage? What did I ever do to you? Savannah laughed. It was an ugly sound. Broken. You didn't do anything, Lauren. That's the problem. You didn't do anything, and you got everything. What exactly are you talking about? You married for love. She spat the word like it was poison. You found someone who actually wants you, who chose you, who looks at you like you're the only person in the room. She gestured at Ethan. He's never going to look at someone else and wish he was with them. He's never going to spend 7 years waiting for someone better to notice him. He actually loves you. Her voice broke. And I have to watch it. Every holiday, every family dinner, I have to watch you be happy while I'm stuck in this prison I built for myself. Waiting for a man who doesn't even know I exist. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Do you know what that's like? To realize you wasted your entire life on someone who will never want you, and then look across the table at your sister who has everything you'll never have. So you tried to destroy it, I said quietly. You told Ethan I married him for money. You told our parents. You tried to make my marriage look fake. Because if your marriage was fake, then I wasn't alone. Savannah screamed. If you were just like me, if you married for money like I married for access, then I wasn't the only pathetic one. I wasn't the only one who wasted my life. We would be the same. 2 sisters who made terrible choices, and I wouldn't have to feel so. She couldn't finish. She just stood there crying, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I understood now. All of it. Savannah didn't hate me. She wasn't trying to hurt me specifically. She just couldn't survive being the only sister with a fake marriage. If she could drag me down to her level, she wouldn't have to face what she'd done alone. But my marriage isn't fake. I said, I love Ethan. He loves me. We're happy. And nothing you say to our parents or anyone else is going to change that. Savannah looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. She had nothing left to say. Mason walked to the front door and opened it. Get out. Savannah turned to him. Mason, please. Get out of my house. I'll have your stuff sent to wherever you end up, but I want you gone tonight. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. Mason's voice was flat. Dead. Go to your parents. You could go to a hotel. Go to Carter for all I care, but you're not staying here. Not after this. Savannah looked at me one last time. I don't know what she was hoping to see. Sympathy maybe. Some sisterly bond that would make me intervene. But I just looked back at her. She made her choice. Now she had to live with it. She grabbed her purse and walked out the door without another word. Mason stood in the doorway watching her go. Then he closed the door and leaned his forehead against it. 7 years, he said quietly. I gave her 7 years. I'm sorry, Mason. I meant it. He was collateral damage in all of this. A good man who did nothing wrong except fall in love with the wrong woman. He turned around and looked at me and Ethan. Thank you for telling me. I needed to know. We left Mason standing in his living room, looking at the empty space where his marriage used to be. In the car, Ethan took my hand. You okay? I thought about it. My parents had disowned me. My sister had tried to destroy my life. I'd spent the whole day uncovering a web of lies that went back 7 years. But I was sitting next to a man who never doubted me, who stood beside me through all of it, who loved me, actually loved me, and wasn't going anywhere. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. Ethan squeezed my hand. She tried to make what we have into something ugly. She failed. She did. Savannah wanted company in her misery. Instead, she ended up completely alone. After Dad's $4,800,000 estate opened, my blood sugar hit 658. My brother filmed instead of helping. 3 weeks later, labs proved he'd swapped my insulin with saline. I awoke on the restroom floor at 2:47 a.m. Paramedics strapped an oxygen mask on my face, while my brother stood in the doorway recording with his phone. Not helpful. Filming. My blood sugar level was 658. The usual range is 70 to 110. At 630 you begin to get diabetic ketoacidosis. At 760, you die. The lead paramedic continued asking when I had last taken my insulin. And I kept telling him 3 hours ago, right before bed, as I had done every night for the preceding 12 years. He gazed at my brother. My brother looked at his phone. And something about that interchange chilled my skin in a way that had nothing to do with the medical crisis actually killing me. The estate struggle began 7 weeks earlier, when our father died of a fatal heart attack at the age of 65, leaving behind a commercial real estate portfolio valued around $4.8 million. My father will share everything 50-50 between me and my brother Caleb. Simple, clean, and fair. Except Caleb had been Dad's business partner for the previous 9 years, while I had been teaching high school chemistry 3 states away. Caleb had access to all of the funds, assets, and papers. He'd been residing at Dad's house since the funeral, purportedly preparing things for probate. I drove down from Michigan to our hometown of Columbus, Ohio, 12 days after Dad died to remain at his house throughout the estate settlement. That's when my diabetes started acting up. I am 35 years old. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 24, shortly after graduating from college. It's been a part of my daily routine for more than 10 years. I understand my body. I recognize the warning signals of high blood sugar, extreme thirst, frequent urination, impaired vision and exhaustion. I understand how excellent control feels against negative control. And I'd had great control for years. My latest A1C test, 4 months before Dad died, was 6.1, which is practically ideal for a diabetic. My endocrinologist, Dr. Michael S. Carter from Ann Arbor Medical Center, genuinely praised me at my previous checkup. So, when I began having hypoglycemic symptoms while taking my insulin on a regular basis, I blamed it on stress. Grief causes unexpected changes in your body. Cortisol levels increase. Sleep habits become interrupted. Food habits change. It seemed reasonable that my blood sugar would be more difficult to regulate. Except, it wasn't only more difficult to control. It was totally uncontrolled. Before injecting long-acting insulin at night, I would check my blood sugar. Let us pretend it was 135. Slightly high but doable. I would inject my customary dose of 36 units, which I had been taking for 2 years. Then I'd check again in the morning, anticipating it to be anywhere between 90 and 110. Instead, it would read 380, 420, or 511. I hadn't seen these numbers since I was initially diagnosed and had no idea how to control the condition. Numbers that didn't make sense considering my insulin regimen. I began monitoring my blood sugar every 2 hours and even set alarms to wake up during the night. The trend was constant and disturbing. My insulin simply wasn't functioning. I phoned Dr. Carter's office on a Thursday morning after a particularly horrible night in which my blood sugar reached 512. I spoke with Lauren Hayes, his nurse practitioner who had been overseeing my treatment for the previous 20 months. She asked all the appropriate questions. Have I modified my diet? No. Was I unwell from an infection? No. Was I experiencing extraordinary stress? Well, yeah. My father had recently died and I was dealing with his inheritance. She indicated that stress hormones might definitely develop insulin resistance, making my regular dosages less effective. She upped my overnight long-acting dose from 36 to 44 units and instructed me to call back in 4 days if things did not improve. They did not improve. They became worse. Caleb was quite helpful throughout this time. He saw I wasn't feeling well and kept asking if he could help. He'd bring me bottles of water whenever I mentioned being thirsty. He'd offer to prepare dinner so that I could relax. He'd ask about my blood sugar levels and shake his head compassionately when I informed him they were high. One night, he sat with me in the kitchen while I prepared my injection. "Is it scary?" he inquired, observing me draw insulin from the container into the syringe. "Knowing you must do this every day or you will die." I advised him to get accustomed to it. You don't fully consider the stakes anymore. It becomes routine, much like cleaning your teeth. He nodded slowly and looked at the vial of insulin on the counter. "Where do you keep it?" "In the fridge." I informed him. "Yes, in the door of the upstairs bathroom fridge, the small one Dad installed when Mom was sick." Caleb was aware that he had previously lived in this house, but he inquired nevertheless. The estate lawyer, Thomas Whitaker of Whitaker and Associates, planned our first official meeting for Monday morning, 4 weeks after I arrived. I was feeling really bad by that moment. The persistently elevated blood sugar was creating a variety of secondary symptoms. Constant exhaustion, difficulties concentration, and blurry eyesight made reading texts uncomfortable. Frequent visits to the restroom disrupted the conference several times. Whitaker often paused his explanation of the probate procedure to ask if I wanted a break. I continued apologizing and explaining that I was all right, just struggling with some health concerns. Caleb sat across the meeting table, hands folded, appearing worried and patient. "Maybe we should reschedule," he said after my third restroom trip. "You clearly aren't feeling well." Whitaker agreed that it could be best. We rescheduled on the following Monday. I left the meeting feeling ashamed and irritated. I had seemed incompetent in front of our father's lawyer. Worse, I had appeared unstable, as if I couldn't handle fundamental adult obligations. That evening I upped my insulin dosage without first phoning Dr. Carter's office. I took 58 units rather than 44. It was foolish and even hazardous to take such a large jump without medical supervision, but I was desperate. I needed to get my blood sugar under control before our next appointment with Whitaker. I couldn't afford to appear distraught during the estate processes. My blood sugar level before bedtime was 371. The following morning, it was 552. I had taken 58 units of long-acting insulin, and my blood sugar had risen by 181 points. That isn't how insulin works. That is not how any of this works. Something wasn't right with me. Something outside stress, bereavement, or insulin resistance. I scheduled an appointment with a local endocrinologist, Dr. Allison Grant, at Columbus Diabetes Associates, and was seen 2 days later after stressing the situation was an emergency. Dr. Grant was in her late 40s, with gray-streaked hair and the calm, analytical manner of a specialist dealing with a medical emergency. She looked at my blood sugar logs, insulin dosage data, and a recent A1C test from Michigan. Then she examined me, looking for evidence of lipohypertrophy, a kind of scar tissue that might interfere with insulin absorption. Everything seemed perfect. She ordered a full blood workup, which included a C-peptide test to assess my pancreatic function, a hormone imbalance screening, and an insulin antibody test. "I'm going to be honest with you," she added, removing her exam gloves. "The presentation does not make physiological sense. You should respond to these insulin dosages. We need to find out why you aren't." The blood test was returned within 36 hours. Everything was usual. My pancreas was not making insulin, as predicted for type 1 diabetes. My thyroid function was fine. There is no illness, no hormonal imbalance, and no insulin antibodies. Dr. Grant phoned me personally to explain the findings. "I want you to come back in and bring your insulin vials," she told me. "All of them, including the ones you're using now and any backups you have. I'd like to test them." I asked her what she felt was wrong. There was a lengthy delay on the line. "I don't want to speculate until we rule out environmental factors," she explained cautiously. "However, if your insulin is incorrectly maintained or contaminated, this might explain why it isn't working. Can you come tomorrow morning?" I said yes. I grabbed all of my insulin vials that evening. I had 3. The one I was using from the bathroom fridge, a backup in the same fridge, and an unopened one in my luggage case from Michigan. I arranged them on my dresser to bring to Dr. Grant in the morning. Then I headed downstairs to prepare dinner. Caleb was in the kitchen, staring at his phone. "Are you okay?" he inquired, looking up. "You've seemed stressed lately." I assured him I was all right, but annoyed with my blood sugar concerns. He nodded compassionately. So, let me know if there's anything I can do to assist. We are in this together, right? Dad would have wanted us to take care of one another. I thanked him and reheated the leftovers. After supper, I returned upstairs to prepare my nightly injection. When I reached for the vials on my dresser, the backup vial was in a different location than I had placed it. Not much altered, but slightly displaced, about an inch to the left, something you may miss if you weren't paying attention. My hands became shaky. I told myself I was too paranoid. I persuaded myself that the stress of Dad's death, the estate processes, and my medical concerns were causing me to perceive conspiracies where none existed. I assured myself Caleb wouldn't do that. He was my brother. We had grown up together. We had shared a room until I went to college. He'd been there when I was initially diagnosed with diabetes, teaching me how to administer injections and monitor my blood sugar levels. He phoned me every few months to see how I was doing and whether my diabetes was under control. He cared for me. But I also recall what Dad had stated approximately a year before his death. During one of our phone discussions, he said that Caleb had been pressing for a change in the business structure that would make Caleb the major owner and Dad a silent partner. Dad had refused. I built this company, he had stated. I'm not signing it away while I'm still alive and capable. Caleb had been furious with the choice. Very furious. I did not take my insulin that night. Instead, I visited a 24-hour pharmacy and purchased 3 fresh vials with my insurance. They were pricey, at $110 each, even with insurance. But I had to know. I needed to exclude the idea that something was amiss with my existing supply. I took my nightly dosage with one of the brand new drugstore vials. My blood sugar level before the injection was 382. When I woke up the next morning and tested again, it was 109. Which is normal, healthy, and exactly where it should be. After an appropriate dosage of long-acting insulin, I sat on the side of my bed, looking at the glucose meter display, feeling chilly all over my body. The insulin from the pharmacist worked. The insulin from my bathroom fridge did not work, indicating that my medicine had been tampered with. I phoned Dr. Grant and informed her that I had found out the problem. She questioned what I meant. I described buying fresh insulin at the pharmacy and receiving a normal result for the first time in weeks. She paused for a bit before saying, "Bring in all of your old vials today if possible. I'm going to have them evaluated by our lab and file a report with the Ohio Board of Pharmacy. If your medicine was tampered with, this is a serious offense." I agreed to come in within an hour. Then I went to the bathroom fridge and got the vials. The current one I was using was still there. The backup vial was gone. I had noticed it the night before on my dresser. It wasn't in either the bathroom or my bedroom. I looked for 25 minutes before acknowledging the apparent reality. Someone had snatched it. Someone who realized I was growing suspicious. Someone gained access to the house and my stuff. Someone who was my brother. I drove to Dr. Grant's office with the 2 leftover vials. The one I was currently using, and the unopened one from my Michigan travel case. Dr. Grant greeted me in an exam room with a worried expression that made her appear older than she did at our initial session. She gave over the vials to a lab worker who photographed them and filled out chain of custody documents. "These will go to Ohio State's Medical Forensics Lab," Dr. Grant added. "They may evaluate the contents to see whether there has been any replacement or contamination. The procedure takes around 4 to 6 business days." I asked her what she believed had happened. She selected her words carefully. "In my 17 years of practicing endocrinology, I've encountered 3 instances of pharmaceutical manipulation. Both included family members with financial incentives. I cannot make allegations, but anybody with access to your insulin might readily replace it with saline solution or another transparent liquid. The vials appear identical. Without advanced testing, you'd never know." I did not return to Dad's place that night. I got into a downtown hotel and paid with cash since I didn't want Caleb to be able to monitor my credit card. I sat in my hotel room, reflecting on everything that had transpired during the previous 4 weeks. My blood sugar difficulties began shortly after I arrived at the residence. Caleb's remarkable care, giving me water, inquiring about my diabetes control, seeing me prepare injections, and his query about where I kept my insulin, which he already knew but asked nevertheless. At the rescheduled estate conference, I appeared incompetent and unstable, just the type of person whose judgment could be challenged in probate court. The missing backup vial from the night made me suspect. And at the heart of it all, there's the money. $4.8 million shared between two brothers, unless one brother is judged unable to manage his inheritance. I contacted the Columbus Police non-emergency number and requested to talk with someone about a possible attempted murder. The dispatcher connected me with Detective Marcus Reed of the Major Crimes Unit. Reed had worked with CPD for 21 years, according to the brief history he provided me when we met at the station the next morning. He was in his mid-40s, with graying hair and sad eyes from witnessing too many betrayals inside his family. I told him everything. Dad's death, the multi-million-dollar inheritance, my odd blood sugar issue, the insulin that stopped functioning, the lost backup vial, and the drugstore insulin that worked wonderfully. Reed listened without interrupting and took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he put down his pen and stared directly at me. "Do you still have access to your father's home?" he asked. I said, "Yes, I still had my key." "Don't go back there alone," Reed said. "If what you're saying is correct, your brother tried to murder you. The fact that he's photographing your medical emergency shows that he's documenting your alleged instability for legal reasons. This was deliberate. This is sophisticated. This is someone who has planned every step." Detective Reed directed Officer Nolan Park to accompany me back to the residence to grab my possessions and any evidence. Park was younger, perhaps in his early 30s, with an intense focus that made you feel both safe and little apprehensive. We got at the house about 10:30 a.m. on a Friday. Caleb's automobile was gone. I let us in with my key and immediately went upstairs to the bathroom. The insulin vial I had been using was still inside the refrigerator door. Park shot it in place before carefully bagging it as evidence, using a body camera to film the entire process. Next, we searched my bedroom. Park discovered an empty insulin bottle in the trash bin next to my dresser, buried among crumpled papers and tissues. Not one of mine, but an extra vial mistakenly dumped by someone who assumed it would be disposed of with the ordinary trash. Park also grabbed that. We then searched Caleb's room. I felt bad about it. Invasive, as if I was breaking some basic trust between brothers. However, Park was thorough and professional, inspecting drawers and closets with trained skill. In Caleb's bedside table, below a stack of financial paperwork pertaining to Dad's estate, Park found a box of saline solution vials, the sort used for wound irrigation or medical treatments. If you don't look closely at the label, it appears precisely like insulin. Park held up the box without touching it directly, using a pen to flip up the top. 2 vials were missing from the original box of 10. Park shot everything from numerous angles, then bagged the entire package. "We'll test these against your insulin vials," he added. "If the contents match, we have physical evidence of substitution. Combined with the medical paperwork from your doctor, this creates a prosecutable case." We were placing the evidence into Park's patrol cruiser when Caleb's vehicle came into the driveway. He climbed out slowly, glancing between me, the uniformed officer, and the evidence bags with an expression that cycled through perplexity, concern, and something more. Something calculated. "What's going on?" he asked, directing the question at me rather than Park. "Is everything okay? Did anything happen?" I did not say anything. Park went forward with his badge displayed. "I'm Officer Nolan Park with Columbus PD. We're collecting evidence related to an ongoing investigation. Do you live at this residence?" Caleb nodded, his gaze never leaving my face. "This is my father's house. My brother and I are both residing here while we settle the estate. What investigation? What evidence?" Park didn't answer. Instead, he requested Caleb to move aside as we completed loading the van. Caleb obeyed, but I could see his mind working, trying to figure out what I knew and what I might show. Detective Marcus Reed phoned me that evening with preliminary results from Ohio State's Medical Forensics Lab. They'd fast-tracked the analysis given the attempted murder claims. "The vial you were actively using," Reed continued, "contains approximately 80% saline solution and 20% insulin. Not enough insulin to be medically useful, but enough that you wouldn't quickly know something was wrong. The saline dilution explains why your blood sugar kept increasing after taking what you believed were enough doses. The unopened vial from your travel case is pure insulin, no tampering, and the empty vial we found in your trash matches the saline solution boxes in your brother's room. Same manufacturer, same batch number." I inquired what occurred next. "Now we build the case," Reed remarked. "We have physical evidence, medical documentation, and opportunity. What we need is motivation testimony, and any proof proving your brother's financial interest in you, seeming incompetent." I called Thomas Whitaker, the estate attorney, and demanded copies of every correspondence between him and Caleb over the preceding 7 weeks. Whitaker was professionally reluctant until I indicated there was a current police investigation into alleged estate fraud and attempted murder. That changed his tone dramatically. He sent over the emails within 2 hours. There were 41 messages total. Most were standard queries regarding probate processes and property appraisals, but 6 communications sent over the period of 12 days voiced worries about my abilities to manage my inheritance. The first email was sent 4 days after I arrived at the residence. I'm worried about my brother's health. He appears highly unorganized and is having problems controlling his diabetes. Is there a method for medical examination if one successor looks unable to perform financial responsibilities? The second email followed 6 days later. My brother had to leave our meeting multiple times due to health issues and seemed confused about basic estate details. I want to make sure he's safeguarded, even if it requires greater oversight of his portion. The cycle continued, each communication meticulously documenting my seeming deterioration, while posing Caleb as the worried responsible sibling seeking to safeguard both of us. Dr. Grant provided a comprehensive medical report detailing my 12-year history of excellent diabetes management, my recent unexplained hypoglycemic crisis, and the immediate normalization of my blood sugar once I switched to uncompromised insulin. Based on the patient's medical history and the laboratory confirmation of insulin tampering, she wrote in her conclusion, "It is my professional opinion that the patient's hypoglycemic episodes were iatrogenically induced through intentional medication substitution. Without intervention, the patient would have progressed to diabetic ketoacidosis, coma, and likely death within days to weeks." She attached my blood sugar logs, showing the dramatic contrast between the 4 weeks of using tampered insulin and the immediate improvement with pharmacy insulin. The documentation was devastating and indisputable. Detective Reed brought Caleb in for questioning on a Monday morning, exactly 5 weeks after the paramedics had found me unconscious on the bathroom floor. I wasn't present for the interview, but Reed recorded everything and played portions back for me later. Caleb maintained his innocence throughout, claiming he had no idea how saline solution ended up in his bedside table, suggesting maybe I'd planted it there to frame him out of grief-induced paranoia. He said he'd been nothing but supportive during my health crisis, that his emails to the estate attorney were genuine expressions of concern, not attempts to undermine my competency. When Reed presented him with the test proof confirming the insulin had been tampered with, Caleb argued maybe the pharmacy had made a mistake, or maybe my diabetes had merely moved to a more severe level. His explanations grew increasingly desperate and contradictory as the interview continued. The breakthrough came when Reed asked Caleb about the video footage, the footage from my medical emergency, which Caleb had filmed on his phone instead of helping. "Why were you recording your brother during a medical crisis?" Reed asked. There was a long silence on the recording. Then Caleb said something that destroyed any remaining pretense of innocence. "I needed documentation for the estate proceedings to show he wasn't capable of managing his portion." Reed asked him to clarify. "Documentation of what specifically?" Another pause. "Of his mental state, his instability." The lawyer said it would be helpful if there were concerns about competency. Reed pressed further. "So you were documenting your brother's medical emergencies to use against him in a state court, and you saw no reason to help him instead?" Caleb realized his mistake too late. He tried to backtrack, claiming he'd called 911 first before recording, that he'd only filmed for a few seconds, but the damage was done. He'd admitted to documenting my crisis for legal advantage rather than providing help. The Ohio prosecutor's office filed charges 4 days later. Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, the tampered insulin qualified as a weapon under Ohio law, and estate fraud. The prosecutor, Madeline Pierce, had spent 14 years in major crimes and had a reputation for being thorough and merciless with white-collar criminals who hurt family members. She scheduled a preliminary hearing for 12 days out. In the meantime, Detective Reed executed a search warrant for all of Caleb's electronic devices, his phone, laptop, tablet, and cloud storage accounts. The digital forensics team found things that made the case even worse. Caleb had researched insulin tampering methods 4 weeks before Dad died. He'd visited forums discussing how to induce diabetic crises without being detected. He'd researched estate competency laws and medical conservatorship procedures. He'd even calculated how long it would take for sustained hypoglycemia to cause permanent organ damage or death. Every search, every calculation, every research query had been saved in his browser history like a roadmap of premeditated attempted murder. But the most damaging evidence came from Caleb's text messages with his girlfriend, someone named Rebecca Dalton, who worked in medical billing at a local hospital. The messages went back 7 months to before Dad's death. In them, Caleb complained about having to share the estate 1/2 to 1/2 when he'd done all the work building Dad's business. He wrote things like, "Why should he get half when he's been gone for years, and there has to be a way to contest the will." Rebecca had apparently suggested using my diabetes against me. Doesn't he have to take insulin every day? What if something happened with that? Like if he seemed really sick or unstable? Caleb's response: "That's genius. If he can't manage his own health, how can he manage millions of dollars?" The text chain continued over weeks, with Rebecca providing information about insulin storage and effectiveness, Caleb planning when to make the switch, and both of them discussing how to document my decline for legal purposes. The preliminary hearing was brief and brutal. Prosecutor Pierce presented the physical evidence, the medical documentation, the text messages, and the search history. Caleb's attorney, a public defender named Daniel Mercer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted, argued that the case was circumstantial, that the text messages were taken out of context, that Caleb's research could have been motivated by genuine concern for my health. Judge Evelyn Hart, who'd been on the bench for 24 years and had presided over some of Ohio's most notorious family crime cases, wasn't buying it. "Counsel," she said, removing her glasses and addressing Mercer directly. "Your client researched how to make someone diabetic appear unstable, purchased the materials to tamper with medication, had access to the victim's medication storage, exchanged texts, planning this exact scenario, and filmed the resulting medical crisis instead of providing aid. At what point does this stop being circumstantial and start being a clear pattern of intentional harm?" She bound Caleb over for trial with bail set at $600,000. He couldn't make bail. He stayed in county lockup, awaiting trial. The estate proceedings took a different turn after the charges were filed. Thomas Whitaker filed a motion to pause probate pending the outcome of the criminal trial. Ohio has a slayer statute that prevents criminals from inheriting from their victims. And while Dad's death itself was natural causes, the argument was that Caleb's attempt to murder me for my inheritance disqualified him from benefiting from Dad's estate. Judge Hart agreed to pause the proceedings until the criminal case concluded. In the meantime, the court appointed a neutral third-party administrator to manage Dad's properties and accounts. I was relieved. I didn't want the money anymore. I just wanted to understand how my brother, someone I'd grown up with and trusted completely, could look at me and see nothing but an obstacle to wealth. The trial took place 5 months after my near-death experience. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. Dr. Grant testified about the medical impossibility of my blood sugar crisis occurring naturally given my history. Dr. Carter, my Michigan endocrinologist, testified via video about my years of excellent control. The Ohio State forensic chemist testified about the insulin dilution and saline substitution. Detective Reed testified about finding the empty vial in my trash and the saline boxes in Caleb's room. Officer Park testified about the evidence collection. The digital forensic specialist testified about Caleb's research history and text messages. And I testified about watching my brother film me during a medical emergency instead of helping. About the missing backup insulin vial. About realizing someone I loved had spent weeks systematically poisoning me. Caleb's defense was weak and desperate. Attorney Mercer tried to argue that Rebecca Dalton had been the mastermind, that she'd manipulated Caleb into this scheme, that he'd just been going along with her suggestions without really understanding the consequences. The jury didn't buy it. Caleb was 37 years old, a successful businessman who'd co-managed a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. He wasn't some naive victim led astray by a girlfriend. The text messages showed him actively planning, researching, and executing the medication tampering. Rebecca was charged separately as an accomplice and took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Caleb in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony was devastating. She described how Caleb had asked her for advice about making someone look medically unreliable. How he'd specifically mentioned my diabetes as a vulnerability. How he'd laughed about me getting sicker while he documented everything for the estate case. The jury deliberated for under 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree. Assault with a deadly weapon. Estate fraud. Judge Evelyn Hart scheduled sentencing for 12 days later. When that day came, she delivered a statement that I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Mr. Parker," she said, addressing Caleb directly as he stood in his orange jumpsuit and restraints. "You looked at your brother and saw only money. You took his trust, his love, and his medical vulnerability, and weaponized them in service of greed. You researched how to kill him slowly enough that it would look like natural causes or medical mismanagement. You documented his suffering not to help, but to use against him. You stole weeks of his life and nearly stole all of it. This court finds your actions to be among the most callous and calculated it has encountered. She sentenced him to 21 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for the first 14. Rebecca Dalton got 6 years for conspiracy and accomplice to attempted murder. The estate proceedings resumed after the conviction. Under Ohio's Slayer statute, Caleb was disqualified from inheriting anything from Dad's estate. His entire one-half share reverted to me, by default. I inherited everything. The properties, the business, the bank accounts, all $4.8 million, plus the appreciation that had occurred during the 9 months of legal proceedings. Thomas Whitaker handled the final transfer with professional efficiency. When he handed me the last document to sign, he said something that struck me as both true and terrible. Your father built this legacy to provide for both his sons. It must break his heart, wherever he is, to know one son tried to murder the other for it. I signed the papers and walked out of Whitaker's office as the sole heir to everything Dad had worked for, and all I felt was empty. I moved back to Michigan 12 days later. I couldn't stay in Columbus. Couldn't live in Dad's house where my brother had spent weeks slowly poisoning me while I slept down the hall. I sold the house and most of the properties, keeping only 3 small commercial buildings that generated steady rental income. The money went into trust accounts managed by financial advisors I'd never met, people with no connection to my family or our history. I didn't want to think about it, didn't want to manage it, didn't want the wealth that had almost killed me. I went back to teaching high school chemistry. My students had no idea what I'd been through. They just knew me as Mr. Parker, the teacher who sometimes used diabetes management as an example when teaching about biochemistry and molecular interactions. Dr. Carter recommended I see a therapist to process everything that had happened. I started seeing Dr. Sophia Ramirez, a trauma specialist in Ann Arbor, who'd worked with victims of family violence. The first few sessions were just me trying to articulate how it felt to realize my brother had watched me get sicker and done nothing, had actively made me sicker, had filmed my near-death experience like it was content for his legal case. Dr. Ramirez helped me understand that betrayal trauma is different from other types of trauma because it destroys your baseline ability to trust. You have to rebuild your sense of safety from the ground up. She said, you have to learn that what happened with your brother was specific to him, not representative of all relationships or all family bonds. It took months before I could even begin to believe that. I still check my insulin obsessively. Every vial gets inspected before use. I bought a small safe for my medication, and I'm the only one with the combination. I test my blood sugar more frequently than necessary, paranoid that somehow the numbers will start climbing again, even though I know rationally that I'm using uncompromised insulin from sealed pharmacy containers. The trauma left marks that go beyond the physical. My current A1C is back to 6.3. Excellent control, according to Dr. Carter. But the psychological cost of what Caleb did can't be measured in blood glucose levels or hemoglobin markers. I visited Caleb in prison once, about 14 months after his conviction. I don't know why I went. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to hear him explain how he justified it to himself. Maybe I needed to see him in that gray prison uniform and understand that justice had been served. We sat across from each other in the visitation room with a plexiglass barrier between us and phones connecting our voices. He looked older, smaller somehow, diminished by incarceration. I asked him why. Why had he done it? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I convinced myself you didn't deserve it. Half of everything Dad built. You left, went to Michigan, became a teacher. I stayed here, worked with him every day, learned the business. In my mind, I'd earned it all, and you'd earned nothing. The money became more important than you being alive. I don't know when that happened, but it did. I asked if he was sorry. He nodded. Every single day. But that doesn't change anything, does it? I told him. No, it didn't. Then I hung up the phone and left. I haven't been back. The weird thing about surviving attempted murder by a family member is that people don't know how to talk to you about it. They offer condolences like you've lost someone to natural causes. They say things like, at least he's in prison now, as if incarceration equals healing. They avoid asking questions because they don't want to be intrusive. So you end up carrying the story alone. My colleagues at the high school know what happened. It made local news in Michigan too. But no one mentions it. I'm just the chemistry teacher who takes insulin before lunch and sometimes zones out during faculty meetings because I'm remembering what it felt like to wake up with paramedics strapping a mask to my face while my brother stood in the doorway filming. Dr. Ramirez says, I'm making progress. I've started dating again cautiously and with significant trust issues that I'm upfront about from the start. I've reconnected with friends I'd pulled away from during the estate proceedings. I've established new routines that feel safe and controllable. But there are still moments when the weight of everything crashes down, like when I'm preparing my nighttime injection and I have a flash of panic wondering if the insulin is real. Or when I pass estate planning offices and remember sitting in Whitaker's conference room feeling like I was dying while my brother calmly documented my incompetence for legal advantage. Or when I see news stories about families torn apart by inheritance disputes, and I think about how Dad never could have imagined his estate would become my attempted murder weapon. The money from Dad's estate sits in accounts I rarely access. I live on my teacher's salary, about $68,000 a year, which is enough for a decent apartment and a reliable car, and the occasional weekend trip. The inheritance feels like blood money, tainted by what Caleb did to get it. But Dr. Ramirez reminds me that Dad wanted me to have it. That using it doesn't mean accepting what Caleb did. That I'm allowed to benefit from my father's legacy without carrying guilt for my brother's crimes. Rationally, I understand that. Emotionally, I'm still working on it. I've started using small amounts to fund diabetes research at the Ohio State Medical School, and to support programs teaching high school students about science and medicine. If Dad's money has to be part of my life, at least it can do some good. Sometimes I wonder if Caleb thinks about what he lost. Not the inheritance or the properties or the business partnership with Dad. Those are just money and assets. I wonder if he thinks about losing a brother. If he remembers the years before greed made me into a target instead of family. We used to be close, or I thought we were. We'd call each other every few months to catch up. We'd visit during holidays when our schedules aligned. He'd helped me through my diabetes diagnosis, learning about the disease alongside me so he could understand what I was dealing with. Or maybe that was research too. Maybe he was always calculating, always looking for advantages, always seeing relationships as transactions. I'll never know which memories were real and which were strategy. Judge Hart's words come back to me often. You looked at your brother and saw only money. That's what haunts me most. Not the physical danger, not even the betrayal itself, but the reduction of everything we'd been to each other down to a dollar amount. $2.4 million to be exact. That's what my half of the estate was worth. That's what Caleb decided was worth watching me die. The math is simple and horrifying. My life, my trust, our shared childhood, our father's love for both of us. All of it calculated and found less valuable than money. You can't come back from understanding that. You can't unknow that equation. I still have the glucometer reading from that first morning after using the pharmacy insulin. 109, normal, safe, proof that my body wasn't failing, that my diabetes hadn't suddenly become uncontrollable, that the crisis was manufactured. I kept the printout in a drawer for months, looking at it sometimes when I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions had been justified, that the person who tried to kill me was actually imprisoned for it and not walking around free. Dr. Ramirez eventually suggested I let go of that printout, that holding on to physical evidence was keeping me stuck in survival mode when I needed to move toward recovery. I threw it away, but I still remember the number 109, the proof that saved my life. The criminal case made local news, but never went national. Ohio teachers didn't recognize my name or my story when I returned to Michigan. I was grateful for that anonymity. I could rebuild my life without carrying the label of that guy, whose brother tried to kill him for inheritance money. My students know me as someone who explains molecular bonds with enthusiasm and occasionally brings in donuts for the class. My neighbors know me as the quiet guy in Unit 4C who's pleasant in the elevator and always sorts his recycling correctly. My therapist knows the full story and a few close friends know the outline. But most of my world is built on normal interactions that have nothing to do with attempted murder or family betrayal or estate fraud. That normality is precious and a hard one. There are good days now. Days where I don't think about Caleb or the tampered insulin or the paramedics finding me on the bathroom floor. Days where my diabetes is just a manageable chronic condition rather than a weapon someone used against me. Days where I can enjoy teaching chemistry without the irony of explaining how molecules interact while remembering that someone used molecular manipulation to try to kill me. Those days are increasing in frequency, and Dr. Ramirez says that's the definition of healing. Not forgetting what happened, but reducing how much space it takes up in your daily existence. I'm working on that. Some days are easier than others. I keep Dad's watch, the one Mom gave him on their 20th anniversary. Caleb hadn't wanted it during the estate division because it wasn't worth much monetarily. Just a regular Seiko with a leather band worn from years of daily use. But it was Dad's, and wearing it makes me feel connected to the parent who loved both of his sons and never imagined one would try to murder the other. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would say if he knew what happened. Whether he'd understand how money corrupted Caleb. Whether he'd blame himself for building an estate valuable enough to kill for. Whether he'd forgive either of us, me for surviving and keeping everything, Caleb for attempting murder and losing everything. I'll never know. Dad died thinking his sons would take care of each other after he was gone. Instead, one of us tried to kill the other before the funeral flowers had wilted. I got a letter from Caleb 2 months ago. The prison screened it and forwarded it to my attorney first, protocol for contact between criminals and their victims. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten, full of apologies and regrets and explanations that didn't really explain anything. He wrote about the moment he decided to tamper with my insulin. How he'd convinced himself it was just to make me look unreliable for a few weeks, not to actually kill me. How things had spiraled beyond his original intent. How he wished he could take it back. How he understood if I never forgave him. How he hoped I was doing okay and managing my diabetes well. The cognitive dissonance of that last line, hoping I'm managing the disease he'd weaponized against me, would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. My attorney asked if I wanted to respond. I said, no. What would I even say? Some betrayals are too profound for communication to bridge. Next month marks 4 years since the night I woke up on the bathroom floor with my blood sugar at 658. 4 years since my brother filmed my near death instead of helping. 4 years since I learned that the person who'd grown up sharing a room with me could look at me and see only an obstacle to wealth. Dr. Ramirez says anniversaries of trauma are difficult, that I should expect the memories to feel more intense as the date approaches. She's right. I've been having more nightmares lately. Dreams where I'm checking my blood sugar and the numbers keep climbing no matter how much insulin I take. Dreams where I'm searching for the tampered vials but can't find them. Dreams where I'm trying to tell someone what's happening, but no one believes me. I wake up and check my glucometer immediately, confirming that my blood sugar is normal, that the insulin is working, that I'm safe. It takes a while for my heart rate to settle. The inheritance money funded a diabetes education program at my high school. I worked with the district to create a comprehensive curriculum teaching students about metabolic disorders, insulin function, and the daily realities of chronic disease management. We bring in endocrinologists to speak, demonstrate continuous glucose monitors, and explain how modern medicine allows diabetics to live normal lives. I don't tell the students why I started this program or what happened with my brother. I just teach them that diabetes is manageable, that insulin is life-saving, and that understanding biochemistry can literally save lives. One of my students, a girl named Haley, who was diagnosed with type 1 last year, told me the program helped her feel less alone and less afraid. That made everything feel slightly more bearable. Dad's money filtered through Caleb's crime and my survival, helping a 16-year-old girl understand she's going to be okay. It's not redemption, but it's something. I still teach chemistry. I still take my insulin. I still check my blood sugar religiously. I still see Dr. Ramirez every week. I still avoid Columbus and anything associated with Dad's estate. I still have nightmares about my brother standing in the doorway with his phone out filming. But I'm alive. That's the irreducible fact underneath everything else. Caleb tried to kill me methodically and deliberately over the course of 4 weeks. He researched it, planned it, executed it, and documented it. And I'm still here. That survival doesn't erase the trauma or heal the betrayal, but it matters. Judge Hart said Caleb stole weeks of my life and nearly stole all of it. But he didn't. He's in prison serving 21 years, and I'm in Michigan teaching students about molecular bonds and living a quiet life he tried to take from me. The last thing Dr. Ramirez said in our most recent session was about reclaiming narrative. Your brother wrote a story where you were an obstacle to be removed, she said. But you're writing a different story now. One where you're a survivor, a teacher, someone who took incomprehensible betrayal and transformed it into advocacy and education. That's your narrative. That's your power. I'm still figuring out what that means in practice. Some days I feel powerful, like I've overcome something tremendous and emerged stronger. Other days I feel broken, Like the trust Caleb shattered left cracks that will never fully heal. Both things are probably true. Both narratives exist simultaneously. I'm a survivor and I'm wounded. I inherited everything, and I lost my brother. I'm safe now, and I'll never feel completely safe again. That's the reality of living after attempted murder by family. You carry all of it forward, the survival and the scars, and you build whatever life you can from what remains. My sister slept with my fiancé for 6 months, married him while pregnant, then admitted on tape she planned to cause my miscarriage. After my older sister Rachel discovered that Jasmine had been secretly sleeping with her fiancé Darren for 6 months and was pregnant with his child, there was a lot of tension in the whole family. Of course, Jasmine, the golden child, was shameless, and went on to marry Darren in the exact same venue Rachel had booked, wearing a white dress despite being 7 months pregnant. Rachel found it extremely hard at the beginning, especially since Jasmine had used Rachel's own wedding plans, vendors, and even tried to steal her wedding dress. We were extremely close through this time period, and we helped each other through the betrayal. Eventually, she got over it, met a really successful investment banker named Miles, who understood her past trauma and treated her like a queen. They got married in a beautiful destination wedding in Santorini, and I was actually the maid of honor. She even invited our parents to the wedding, despite the fact they had attended Jasmine's wedding to Darren, and acted like nothing was wrong. My parents didn't attend, however. A few more years went by, and eventually our parents reached out to Rachel, begging to reconcile with her. And this is where the crapstorm started. Rachel agreed to reconcile and came to dinner along with her husband Miles. Jasmine was also there with Darren and their 2 kids. Throughout the evening, I noticed Jasmine kept making snide comments about how some people can't have children, Rachel and Miles had been trying, and how Darren was such an amazing father. But Miles just held Rachel's hand under the table. When it was time for dinner, my parents made a toast. Then out of nowhere, Jasmine stood up and said that she was so blessed to have such a beautiful family, and that she was pregnant again. She then redirected to Rachel and said, "Sis, I know it must be hard for you, because Darren chose me, and we have this beautiful family now. But thanks for your blessing. I know it must be hard for you to be here, knowing you can't have children while I'm on my 3rd, but I applaud your bravery." This was the moment where Jasmine got the biggest reality check of her life. Rachel's husband Miles, who had been quietly investigating Darren's finances for months, stood up and said, "Actually, Jasmine, we have some news too. We're not only expecting twins through IVF, but I've also just finished acquiring Darren's company through a hostile takeover. As of Monday morning, your husband will be unemployed." He then turned to Darren and continued, "Oh, and those 3 other women you've been sleeping with, they've all been contacted by my wife's divorce attorney friend. Jasmine, you might want to get tested. But here's the best part. Remember that prenup you signed because you were so desperate to marry him? Well, the infidelity clause means you get nothing. You're about to be a single mother of 3 with no income, no house, and a cheating husband who's about to be served divorce papers by the woman he's been seeing for the past year. She's pregnant too, by the way. You think you're so special because you won Darren. You want a man who cheats on everyone, including you? You destroyed my wife's life for a man who's been systematically cheating on you since your honeymoon. You're such a pathetic woman that you bragged about stealing him, not realizing you stole trash. My wife upgraded to someone who would never touch another woman, while you downgraded to someone who can't keep it in his pants. How does it feel to know your whole marriage is a lie? That your children will grow up knowing their father has multiple other families? Do you sleep well at night, knowing he's with other women while you're home with the kids? Nobody respects a woman who steals another woman's man, but everybody pities a woman whose stolen man turned out to be worthless." Everyone in the room just stared as Darren's phone began buzzing non-stop. The other women had started posting about him on social media, and his divorce attorney was calling. But then Jasmine started laughing, a slow, unsettling laugh that made everyone uncomfortable. She pulled out her phone and showed us a video. "You think you've won, Rachel? Miles, I've been recording every private conversation you've had in your home for the past 2 years, including the one where you discussed the hostile takeover before it was public information. That's insider trading, sweetheart. And the best part? I have recordings of you admitting to something much, much worse. Something that happened back in college that you thought nobody knew about." Rachel's face went white as Jasmine continued. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off the takeover, you're going to transfer $5 million to my account, and you're going to smile while you do it, or I send this to the FBI tomorrow morning." Miles started to speak, but Jasmine cut him off. "Oh, and Miles, I have recordings of your, let's call them, creative tax strategies too. Turns out Darren wasn't the only one who's been naughty. That's when Rachel started laughing too. She looked at Jasmine with an expression I'd never seen before and said quietly, "You really should have checked who actually owns the security company that installed those cameras, Jess." The room went dead silent. Jasmine's smile faltered for the first time. "What did you just say?" Rachel stood up slowly, her hand resting on her stomach. "I said, you should have checked who owns the security company." Plot twist, little sister. I've known about your recordings for 18 months, and I've been feeding you exactly what I wanted you to hear. Every single word. Jasmine's phone suddenly went black. Then mine. Then everyone's in the room. "The question is," Rachel continued, walking toward Jasmine, "do you want to know what I've been recording in your house? Because I promise you it's so much worse than anything you think you have on me." That's when we heard the sirens outside. The sirens grew louder, and through the dining room window I saw an ambulance pull up to our neighbor's house. Mrs. Chen from 3 doors down was being wheeled out on a stretcher. The timing was coincidental, but the tension in our dining room made it feel like the sirens were for us. Jasmine's hands shook as she frantically pressed buttons on her dead phone. Darren stood frozen, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and fear. Our parents sat speechless, their eyes darting between their 2 daughters like they were watching a tennis match they couldn't comprehend. Rachel pulled out her own phone, which somehow still worked perfectly. She tapped the screen a few times, and suddenly Jasmine's voice filled the room from hidden speakers. "Darren's so stupid, he actually thinks those other women mean something. I've been moving money from his accounts for months. By the time I'm done with him, he'll have nothing left." The recording continued, Jasmine's voice, clear as day, discussing her plans to frame Rachel for various crimes, her schemes to turn their parents against her permanently, and, most damning of all, her confession about deliberately causing Rachel's first miscarriage by slipping something into her drink at a family barbecue 2 years ago. Darren lunged for Rachel's phone, but Miles stepped between them. Despite being smaller than Darren, Miles's calm demeanor made Darren step back immediately. "Sit down," Miles said quietly. Darren sat. Jasmine's face had gone from red to white to green. She clutched her stomach, and for a moment, I thought she might actually be sick right there on our mother's Persian rug. "That's edited," Jasmine stammered. "You can't prove anything. Those recordings are fake." Rachel smiled. And it wasn't a nice smile. "Really?" "Because I have the originals. Time-stamped, location tagged. Some of them even have video, Jess. Like the one where you're in my house, going through my medical records while I was at my fertility appointments. Or the one where you're teaching your son to call me, the sad auntie who can't have babies. He's 4, Jasmine. 4 years old, and you're already teaching him cruelty." Our mother finally found her voice. "Rachel, Jasmine, please, we're family. We can work this out without all this drama." "Drama?" Rachel turned to her mother, and years of suppressed anger finally surfaced. "She slept with my fiancé for 6 months. She wore white to her wedding while pregnant with his child. She used my wedding plans, my vendors, tried to steal my dress, and you called it drama. You attended her wedding like nothing happened. You chose her over me, just like you always have." "We didn't choose sides," our father protested weakly. "Silence is choosing a side," I found myself saying. Everyone turned to look at me. "You've been silent about Jasmine's behavior our whole lives. When she stole Rachel's boyfriends in high school, you said boys will be boys. When she copied Rachel's college essays and got into the same school, you said imitation was flattery. When she literally stole her fiancé, you said Rachel should be happy for her sister. You've been choosing Jasmine by enabling her for 28 years. Jasmine tried a different tactic. Tears. They came easily, they always had. "I'm pregnant," she wailed. "You can't do this to a pregnant woman. Think of my children." "I am thinking of your children," Rachel said coldly. "They deserve better than a mother who lies, cheats, and steals. They deserve better than parents who teach them that hurting others is acceptable if you can get away with it." She turned back to her phone and pulled up another file. "This one's my favorite, Jess. It's you and Darren arguing about his affairs. Not because you're hurt, but because, and I quote, 'Those better not think they're getting any of my money. You knew about every single one of them. You didn't care, as long as the checks kept coming.'" Darren's phone suddenly came back to life, buzzing with what seemed like 100 notifications at once. His face went pale as he read through them. "The business accounts. They're frozen. All of them. How did you? Turns out when you use company funds to pay for hotel rooms for your girlfriends, that's embezzlement," Miles explained calmly. The board was very interested in those receipts. They called an emergency meeting an hour ago. You're not unemployed yet, Darren, but you will be by morning. And those women you've been seeing? They've all been very cooperative with providing evidence. Especially Samantha, the one who's pregnant. She's particularly angry about you telling her you were divorced. Jasmine stood up abruptly, knocking over her water glass. You can't prove any of this. I'll sue you for defamation. I'll take everything you have. With what lawyer? Rachel asked. The one you've been having an affair with? Oh yes, I know about Marcus too. His wife knows now as well. She's also a lawyer, by the way, senior partner at their firm. I don't think Marcus will be taking your calls anymore. The room felt like it was spinning. Our parents looked like they'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Darren was frantically scrolling through his phone, presumably watching his life fall apart in real time. Jasmine stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Here's what's going to happen, Rachel said, standing up and placing a protective hand over her stomach. You're going to leave my house, alone. You're going to stop spreading lies about me. You're going to get therapy, real therapy, not the kind where you manipulate the therapist into thinking you're the victim, and you're going to stay away from me and my family. Or what? Jasmine snarled, the mask finally completely off. You'll release some edited recordings? You think you've won? I'll destroy you. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Rachel pulled up one final video on her phone. It was Jasmine sitting in what looked like Rachel's bedroom, holding a bottle of pills. These should do it, Jasmine's recorded voice said. A few of these in her smoothie and bye-bye baby, she'll think it's another miscarriage. Poor barren Rachel. The room went completely silent. Even the sirens outside had faded away. You recorded yourself planning to poison me, Rachel said quietly. You recorded yourself actually doing it. And you kept a video. Why, Jess? As a trophy. Jasmine's legs gave out, and she collapsed into her chair, all fight gone. I didn't mean, it wasn't supposed to. To what? Kill my baby? Just make me sick enough to miscarry? What exactly was your plan? Our mother started crying, real tears, not the manipulative kind Jasmine wielded like weapons. My babies, she sobbed. What have you done? What have we done? You enabled a monster, I said flatly. And now you're seeing what monsters do when they think they're invincible. Darren suddenly jumped up. I need to go. I need to. The lawyers. I have to. He headed for the door, but Miles's voice stopped him. I wouldn't go home if I were you. Samantha's there with her brothers. They're very protective of their pregnant sister, the one you told you were getting divorced to marry. Darren's face went even paler, if that was possible. He slumped against the door frame. Rachel gathered her purse and took Miles's offered hand. We're leaving now. Jess, you have 48 hours to get your cameras and any other devices out of my home. I've already changed the locks, so you'll need to call first. A security team will supervise your visit. Rachel, please, Jasmine whispered. I'm your sister. No, Rachel said firmly. You're someone who happened to share a womb with me. Sisters don't try to poison each other. Sisters don't steal each other's fiancés. Sisters don't cause miscarriages out of jealousy. You're not my sister. You're just someone I used to know. She turned to our parents. And you too. I'm done hoping you'll choose me. Choose your golden child. Live with that choice. But know that my children will never know you. They'll never know the grandparents who stood by while one daughter tried to destroy the other. As Rachel and Miles walked toward the door, Jasmine made one last desperate attempt. You're recording this too, aren't you? This whole thing? You're just as bad as me. Rachel paused at the doorway and looked back. The difference is, I'm recording evidence of crimes. You recorded yourself committing them. And for the record, this isn't being recorded. I don't need to. Everyone here heard everything. Mom, Dad, Darren, our sister. Everyone knows who you really are now. That's punishment enough. They left, and the silence that followed was deafening. Jasmine sat at the table, staring at her hands. Darren stood frozen by the door. Our parents held each other, looking lost and broken. I stood up to leave too. Where are you going? My mother asked desperately. To Rachel's, I said simply. To celebrate the twins with my actual sister, the one who never tried to poison anyone. The one you should have protected instead of enabling her abuser. As I walked out, I heard Jasmine start to sob, not the fake tears she'd perfected over years of manipulation, but real ugly crying. The kind that comes when you realize you've destroyed everything and everyone around you, And there's no one left to blame but yourself. The ambulance was gone when I stepped outside. The neighborhood was quiet. Peaceful even. But inside that house, a family was falling apart, and for once, the right person was paying the price. I drove to Rachel's house in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I processed what had just happened. The quiet suburban streets felt surreal after the chaos we'd left behind. When I pulled into her driveway, I saw Miles's car already there, and the porch light was on, welcoming me. Rachel opened the door before I could knock. Her face showed exhaustion, but there was also relief. We hugged without words, and I followed her inside, where Miles was making tea in the kitchen. "How long have you known about the poisoning?" I asked, accepting the cup offered. Rachel sat down heavily, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. 6 months. I found the video when I was going through the security footage, looking for something else entirely. At first I couldn't believe it. Even knowing everything Jasmine had done, I never thought she'd go that far. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was our mother, hysterical. Jasmine had shown up at their house at midnight, demanding they help her. She'd brought the kids, who were confused and crying. Darren hadn't come home, and Jasmine had discovered he'd emptied their joint savings account before the business accounts were frozen. I met Rachel for breakfast to update her. She listened calmly, stirring her decaf coffee. "She's going to escalate," Rachel said matter-of-factly. "Jasmine never learned how to lose. This is just the beginning." She was right. By noon, Jasmine had called me 17 times. The voicemails started pleading, then angry, then threatening. She claimed she had more recordings, more secrets. She said she'd ruin all of us if we didn't help her. That afternoon, Rachel invited me to her home office. The walls were covered with timelines, documents, and photographs. It looked like a detective's investigation board. "I've been preparing for this for 2 years," she explained. "Every move Jasmine might make, every lie she might tell, I've anticipated it." She showed me folders of evidence, bank statements showing Jasmine's theft from Darren's accounts, text messages between Jasmine and her various affair partners, even recordings of Jasmine coaching her children to be cruel to Rachel at family gatherings. "The worst part," Rachel said, pulling out another folder, "is what she's done to those kids. She's been using them as weapons since they were born." 3 days passed in relative quiet. Then Jasmine made her next move. She showed up at Miles's investment firm with her children in tow, causing a scene in the lobby. She accused him of destroying her family, of stealing from innocent children. Security had to escort her out, but not before several clients witnessed the spectacle. Miles came home that evening looking stressed for the first time since this began. "She's trying to damage my professional reputation," he told Rachel. "My partners aren't happy about the drama." Rachel squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to affect your work." "Hey," Miles said firmly. "We're in this together. I knew who Jasmine was when I married you. This isn't your fault." But Jasmine wasn't done. The next day she created social media accounts under fake names and started posting Rachel's personal information online. She shared twisted versions of their childhood, painting Rachel as the jealous sister who'd always resented Jasmine's success. She even posted photos from Rachel's first wedding planning, claiming Rachel had stolen the ideas from her. I spent hours reporting the accounts, but new ones kept appearing. Rachel remained calm, documenting everything. "Let her dig her own grave," she said. "Every post is evidence of harassment." A week later, Jasmine tried a different approach. She had the children call Rachel, crying about how they missed their Auntie Becca. The 4-year-old's voice was coached, obviously reading from a script Jasmine had written. "Mommy says you hate us now, why don't you love us anymore?" Rachel had to leave the room after that call. It was the first time I'd seen her cry since this all started. "Those were kids," she whispered. "They don't deserve this." Meanwhile, Darren had resurfaced. He'd been staying with Samantha, the pregnant woman he'd been seeing. But that arrangement exploded when 2 of his other girlfriends showed up at her apartment. The resulting confrontation made it onto neighborhood social media pages, with videos of Darren being chased down the street by 3 angry women. He called me, desperate. "You have to help me talk to Rachel. This has gone too far. I'll do anything to make it stop." "You made your choices, Darren," I told him. "You destroyed your own life." Rachel just held up a mirror. Our parents were caught in the middle, housing Jasmine and the children while trying to process the revelation about the poisoning. Mom called me daily, alternating between defending Jasmine, she was probably joking in that video, and expressing horror. How could she do that to her own sister? 2 weeks into the chaos, Jasmine made her biggest mistake. She contacted Rachel's fertility doctor, posing as Rachel, to try to access her medical records. The clinic had protocols in place and immediately notified Rachel of the attempted breach. This gave Rachel the ammunition she needed. Identity theft and attempted access of medical records were serious crimes. She filed a police report, finally involving authorities, but only for these specific incidents, not the broader family drama. Jasmine panicked. She showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m., pounding on the door. "You have to make her stop," she screamed through the door. "I'm your sister too, how can you take her side?" I called building security without opening the door. As they escorted her out, she screamed threats about ruining my life too. How she knew things about me that would destroy my career. Empty threats, but the neighbors heard everything. The next morning, Rachel's lawyer sent Jasmine a cease and desist letter. It outlined every incident of harassment, every threatening message, every attempt to damage Rachel and Miles's reputations. It was comprehensive and damning. Jasmine's response was to try to manipulate our parents into taking out a loan to help her. She claimed she needed money for a lawyer to fight Rachel's lies. Dad, showing backbone for the first time in my memory, refused. "We've enabled you enough," he said. "You poisoned your sister, you recorded yourself doing it, there's no excuse for that." This rejection broke something in Jasmine. She started making increasingly erratic decisions. She pulled the children out of school, claiming Rachel had spies there. She moved out of our parents' house and into a motel, dragging the confused kids with her. Child Protective Services got involved after the school reported the children's absence and Jasmine's concerning behavior. This wasn't Rachel's doing, but Jasmine blamed her anyway. The social worker who visited found the children living in chaos, eating fast food for every meal, while Jasmine spent her time creating fake social media accounts and recording rambling videos about how she was being persecuted. During this time, Rachel focused on her pregnancy. The stress was affecting her health, and her doctor put her on partial bed rest. I spent most evenings at her house, helping with meals and just being present. We didn't talk about Jasmine during these visits. Instead, we planned for the twins, discussed baby names, and watched mindless TV shows. But Jasmine wouldn't let us have peace. She discovered where Rachel's doctor's appointments were and started showing up at the medical building. She wouldn't approach Rachel directly, just stood in the parking lot watching. It was deeply unsettling. Miles hired private security to accompany Rachel to appointments. Jasmine filmed the security guards and posted videos claiming Rachel had hired thugs to intimidate her. The comments on these videos were not what Jasmine expected. Most people could see through her manipulation and called her out for stalking a pregnant woman. 3 weeks into this nightmare, Darren's life completely imploded. The board officially fired him for embezzlement. His assets were frozen pending investigation. Samantha had her baby, a girl, and immediately filed for child support. The other women he'd been seeing came forward with their own claims. He was facing financial ruin from multiple directions. In desperation, Darren did something unexpected. He went to the police and confessed to everything: his affairs, his embezzlement, even his knowledge of Jasmine's plans to harm Rachel. He offered to testify against Jasmine in exchange for leniency on his charges. Jasmine found out about Darren's betrayal when detectives showed up at the motel to question her. According to the police report I later saw, she completely lost control, throwing objects and screaming incoherently. The children witnessed everything. That was the final straw for child services. They removed the children from Jasmine's custody, placing them temporarily with our parents while the investigation continued. Jasmine blamed Rachel for this too, even though Rachel had nothing to do with it. The night the children were removed, Jasmine sent one last message to Rachel. It was a video of her standing on a bridge, threatening to jump if Rachel didn't call off the lawyers and give her money. Rachel immediately called emergency services, who found Jasmine at the location and took her for psychiatric evaluation. During Jasmine's 72-hour hold, more truth came out. The psychiatrist discovered Jasmine had been taking Darren's ADHD medication for years, mixing it with alcohol and other substances. Her erratic behavior was partly fueled by substance abuse, though it didn't excuse her calculated cruelty. Our parents aged visibly during this period. They attended therapy themselves, finally confronting how their favoritism had created this situation. "We always gave Jasmine what she wanted," Mom told me tearfully. "We thought we were keeping peace. We were just teaching her that she could hurt people without consequences." When Jasmine was released from psychiatric hold, she found herself truly alone for the first time. Darren was gone, dealing with his own legal troubles. Her children were with her parents, who now had strict boundaries about her access to them. Her friends had distanced themselves after seeing her social media meltdowns. Even Marcus, the lawyer she'd been having an affair with, had filed a restraining order after she showed up at his house and confronted his wife. She moved into a smaller motel and got a job at a grocery store, her first real employment in years. She continued posting videos, but they became less coherent, more rambling. Her followers dwindled as people lost interest in her manufactured drama. Meanwhile, Rachel's pregnancy progressed. The twins were growing well despite the stress. She and Miles had turned the spare bedroom into a nursery, painting it soft yellow with white trim. I helped them assemble cribs one afternoon, and for a few hours, we could pretend everything was normal. But normal was still far away. Jasmine discovered Rachel's baby registry online and began ordering items to be delivered, but with disturbing notes attached. "For the babies you stole from me," one read. Another said, "Hope these replace the ones that didn't make it." Rachel had to contact every store on her registry to block Jasmine's access. It was exhausting, having to constantly defend against these small acts of harassment. But Rachel remained methodical, documenting everything, building her case. 6 weeks after the dinner confrontation, Jasmine made one final desperate play. She contacted a tabloid journalist, offering to sell her story about the evil sister who destroyed her life. She provided the recordings she'd made, the ones she thought showed Rachel and Miles confessing to crimes. The journalist, however, was more interested in Jasmine's own admissions on those recordings. Instead of the exposé Jasmine wanted, the article focused on her confession to poisoning her pregnant sister. Jasmine had accidentally given them evidence of her own crimes while trying to frame Rachel. When the article came out, Jasmine's remaining support evaporated. The few people who'd believed her victim narrative were horrified by her own words, admitting to causing Rachel's miscarriage. Even online, where she'd found some sympathizers, people turned against her. Our parents finally took decisive action. They filed for temporary custody of Jasmine's children and began the process of protecting them from their mother's influence. It was painful for them, but they recognized that those children needed stability and safety. Jasmine's response was to violate the cease and desist order, spectacularly. She showed up at Rachel's house while I was there for dinner. She didn't ring the doorbell, just stood in the yard, staring at the windows. When Miles went out to tell her to leave, she started screaming about how Rachel had ruined her life, how she'd stolen everything. The neighbors called the police. As they arrived, Jasmine pulled out her phone and started live streaming, claiming she was being arrested for loving her sister too much. The officers were professional but firm. She was violating a legal order. She needed to leave or face arrest. Jasmine chose arrest. As they handcuffed her, she looked directly at the camera and said, "Rachel, I know you're watching. This isn't over. You took everything from me. My husband, my children, my life. I'll never stop making you pay." But even as she said it, you could see the defeat in her eyes. She'd lost everything. Not because Rachel had taken it, but because she'd destroyed it herself with her lies, her cruelty, and her inability to accept responsibility for her actions. I stayed with Rachel that night. She was shaken by Jasmine's appearance, but also strangely calm. "I knew it would come to this," she said. "Jasmine always has to have the last word, even when she's already lost." The arrest was a violation of her cease and desist, which meant actual legal consequences. Jasmine spent the night in jail and was released on bail the next morning. Our parents, finally drawing firm boundaries, refused to pay her bail. She had to use a bail bondsman, adding another financial burden to her mounting problems. The stress of everything was taking its toll on Rachel. Her doctor was concerned about her blood pressure and the risk of early labor. She was put on complete bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Miles took time off work to care for her, and I arranged my schedule to be there during the days when he couldn't. During this quiet period, Rachel finally opened up about the depth of Jasmine's betrayal. "It wasn't just Darren," she said one afternoon. "It was every boyfriend I ever had, every achievement I worked for, every moment of happiness. She couldn't stand to see me have anything she didn't." She showed me old diaries from high school, where she'd documented Jasmine's systematic campaign to undermine her. Teachers Jasmine had charmed into giving Rachel lower grades. Friends Jasmine had turned against her with carefully placed lies. Opportunities Jasmine had sabotaged with anonymous complaints. "I thought getting away for college would help," Rachel continued. "But she followed me, applied to the same school using my essays, got into my sorority, even dated my ex-boyfriends after I broke up with them, just to prove she could." The pattern was clear and disturbing. Jasmine's entire identity seemed built around taking things from Rachel. Without that dynamic, she didn't know who she was, and now, with nothing left to take, she was falling apart. 2 months after the confrontation, the legal consequences began catching up with everyone. Darren pled guilty to embezzlement charges and received 2 years in prison, though he'd likely serve less with good behavior. His testimony against Jasmine was part of his plea deal. Jasmine's trial for identity theft and harassment was set for the following month. Her public defender advised her to take a plea deal, but Jasmine refused. She insisted on her day in court, convinced she could make everyone see that she was the real victim. Our parents struggled with the decision to testify against Jasmine. They'd already provided statements about the poisoning video and Jasmine's confession, but taking the stand felt like a final betrayal of their daughter. Their therapist helped them see it differently. Testifying was about protecting the grandchildren and holding Jasmine accountable, not about choosing sides. During this time, Rachel went into early labor. The stress had finally overwhelmed her body's ability to protect the pregnancy. I was with her when her water broke, 5 weeks before her due date. The rush to the hospital was terrifying, with Rachel gripping my hand and whispering, "Not again, please, not again." But this time was different. The twins, a boy and a girl, were born small but healthy. They spent 2 weeks in the NICU, but there were no serious complications. Rachel and Miles named them Alyssa and Noah, new beginnings with no connection to the family drama. Jasmine found out about the births through social media. Someone had posted congratulations on Miles's company page. Her reaction was to send a card to the hospital. "Congratulations on stealing my life so completely. Enjoy my leftovers." Hospital security intercepted the card, adding it to the evidence file for Jasmine's upcoming trial. Even in what should have been Rachel's moment of joy, Jasmine couldn't resist trying to cause pain. As the twins came home and life settled into a new routine, the extended family began to heal. Our parents, granted temporary custody of Jasmine's children, worked with therapists to undo the damage of their mother's manipulation. The children slowly began to understand that love didn't mean hurting others, that family meant support, not sabotage. Darren, from prison, sent a letter of apology to Rachel. It was rambling and self-pitying, but he did acknowledge the pain he'd caused. Rachel read it once and threw it away. "He's not worth the energy," she said, focused instead on her babies and her future. Jasmine's world continued to shrink. She lost her job after missing shifts for court appearances. Her motel kicked her out for non-payment. She moved in with a distant cousin who hadn't heard the full story, but that arrangement lasted less than a week once the cousin Googled Jasmine's name and found the tabloid articles. The night before her trial, Jasmine made one last attempt at manipulation. She called her parents, sobbing about how sorry she was, how she'd gotten help and was better now. She begged them to drop the charges, to give her another chance. When they gently refused, explaining that the charges weren't theirs to drop, she exploded in rage, showing that nothing had really changed. The trial itself was swift, the evidence was overwhelming. Jasmine's own recordings, meant to blackmail Rachel, became proof of her crimes. Her social media posts showed a clear pattern of harassment. The identity theft at the medical office was documented and undeniable. Jasmine took the stand against her lawyer's advice. She tried to paint herself as a loving sister, driven to desperation by Rachel's cruelty. But under cross-examination, her story fell apart. She couldn't explain the poisoning video. She couldn't justify the identity theft. Her tears, which had always been her weapon, now seemed hollow and manipulative to everyone watching. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge, noting the particular cruelty of poisoning a pregnant woman and the ongoing harassment, sentenced Jasmine to 18 months in prison and 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to have no contact with Rachel, Miles or their children. As they led Jasmine away, she turned to look at Rachel one last time. The hatred in her eyes was mixed with something else, confusion maybe, as if she still couldn't understand how her lifetime of manipulation had led to this moment. Rachel didn't attend the sentencing. She was home with her twins, building the life Jasmine had tried so hard to destroy. When I told her about the verdict, she simply nodded. "It's over," she said quietly. "Finally, it's over." But we all knew it wasn't really over. Jasmine would serve her time and eventually be released. She'd have to rebuild her life from nothing, hopefully learning from her mistakes, but possibly just becoming more bitter. The children would grow up knowing their mother had chosen cruelty over family. The scars would remain. Still, as I watched Rachel cuddle her babies while Miles made dinner, I saw hope. She'd survived Jasmine's worst attacks. She'd protected herself and her family. She'd refused to let Jasmine's poison, literal and figurative, destroy her chance at happiness. Our family would never be what it once was. The illusion of harmony had been shattered, replaced by something more honest, if more painful. But maybe that was better. Maybe facing the truth, however ugly, was the first step toward real healing. As I left Rachel's house that evening, I thought about the different paths the two sisters had taken. Rachel had chosen love, building a life with Miles and their children. Jasmine had chosen hate, destroying everything she touched in her need to hurt her sister. The consequences of those choices were now clear. Rachel was surrounded by love, building a future. Jasmine was alone, facing the ruins of the life she demolished with her own hands. It was justice of a sort, not perfect, not complete, but real. The twins were crying as I reached my car. The normal sounds of a healthy family. Through the window I could see Miles and Rachel working together to soothe them, a team united in love and purpose. This was what Jasmine had tried to steal, what she'd never understood. Real love wasn't about taking from others, it was about building something together. As I drove away, I knew the hard times weren't over. There would be appeals, probation hearings, and the ongoing challenge of protecting the children from their mother's influence. But Rachel had proven she could handle whatever came next. She'd faced her sister's worst and emerged stronger. The family we'd grown up in was gone, destroyed by Jasmine's choices and our parents' enabling. But from those ashes, something new was growing. A family based on truth instead of pretense, on accountability instead of excuses. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The morning after Jasmine's sentencing, I woke to my phone buzzing with texts from an unknown number. The messages were from Jasmine's cellmate's sister, offering to deliver messages for a fee. I blocked the number immediately, but more kept coming throughout the day from different phones. Jasmine had found a way to continue her harassment, even from behind bars. Rachel and Miles decided to change their phone numbers, but Jasmine's reach extended beyond direct contact. She'd convinced another inmate to have their family members create new social media accounts, posting old photos of Rachel and Darren with captions about true love stolen by jealous sisters. The posts tagged Rachel's colleagues, Miles's business partners, even the pediatrician caring for the twins. Our parents discovered Jasmine had been calling them collect multiple times daily, leaving voicemails that alternated between tearful apologies and vicious threats. When they stopped accepting the calls, she started writing letters, dozens of them, sometimes 5 or 6 arriving in a single day. The letters contained detailed plans for what she'd do when released, how she'd get her children back, how she'd make Rachel pay. One letter particularly disturbed our father. In it, Jasmine described watching Rachel's house, noting the times Miles left for work, when I visited, even when the mail was delivered. The details were too accurate to be guesswork. Someone on the outside was feeding her information. That someone turned out to be Caleb, a man Jasmine had met through a prison pen pal website. He'd been visiting her regularly, bringing her commissary money, and promising to help her get revenge on Rachel. Our parents only discovered this when Caleb showed up at their house, claiming Jasmine had sent him to collect her belongings, which apparently included family photo albums and Rachel's old yearbooks. Dad refused to let him in, but Caleb returned the next day, and the next. He'd park outside their house for hours, just watching. When Mom finally called the police, Caleb insisted he was just visiting his fiancé's family. Jasmine had apparently accepted his proposal during a jailhouse visit, despite having known him for less than 2 months. Rachel hired a private investigator to look into Caleb. What they found was disturbing: a history of attaching himself to incarcerated women, draining their families of money with promises to help their loved ones. He had 3 restraining orders from previous fiancés' families. But Jasmine either didn't know or didn't care. She'd found someone willing to be her weapon on the outside. The investigator also discovered something else. Caleb had been in contact with Darren's former mistresses, trying to gather dirt on Rachel and Miles. Most had refused to talk to him, but one, a woman named Vanessa, had been feeding him information in exchange for money Jasmine promised she'd have soon. This explained the accurate details in Jasmine's letters. Vanessa worked at a coffee shop near Rachel's neighborhood and had been noting their routines. When confronted by the investigator, she broke down and admitted Caleb had promised her $5,000 for information that could destroy Rachel's perfect life. Meanwhile, Jasmine's children were struggling. The oldest had started having nightmares, calling out for mommy in his sleep. The middle child had become withdrawn, refusing to speak at school. The youngest, barely 2, kept asking when mommy was coming home. Our parents were doing their best, but the children needed more help than they could provide. Rachel made a difficult decision. Despite the no-contact order, she felt responsible for her nephews and niece. She couldn't interact with them directly, but she set up education funds for each child and arranged for a child psychologist to work with them weekly. The bills went to our parents, but Rachel paid them quietly, never seeking recognition. Caleb escalated his harassment. He started showing up at Miles's office, claiming to have business proposals. When security turned him away, he'd wait in the parking garage, approaching Miles's colleagues with stories about how Miles had destroyed an innocent family. Several clients expressed concern, and Miles's partners called a meeting to discuss the situation. Miles handled it brilliantly. He presented all the documentation, the restraining orders against Caleb, Jasmine's conviction, the evidence of her crimes. His partners were appalled, not at Miles, but at the lengths Jasmine was going to from prison. They hired additional security and banned Caleb from the building. But Caleb wasn't done. He showed up at the twins' daycare, claiming to be their uncle. The daycare followed protocol and called Rachel immediately. She arrived to find Caleb arguing with the director, insisting he had a right to see his family. The police arrested him for trespassing, but he was released within hours. That night, Rachel found Caleb in her backyard. He was taking photos through the windows with a telephoto lens. Miles chased him off, but not before Caleb shouted that Jasmine would never stop fighting for what was hers. The security system captured everything, and this time Caleb was arrested for stalking. But even from jail, he managed to cause problems. He'd given Jasmine's letters to other inmates' visitors to mail, circumventing the prison's monitoring system. The letters contained photos Caleb had taken: Rachel at the grocery store, Miles at a gas station, me walking into my apartment building. Our parents were at their breaking point. Mom had developed anxiety attacks, jumping every time the doorbell rang. Dad had started sleeping with a baseball bat beside the bed. They loved Jasmine's children but felt trapped between protecting them and protecting themselves from their daughter's escalating campaign of terror. Then came the breaking point. Jasmine's cellmate was released and showed up at Rachel's house with a message. She stood on the porch, reading from a paper in Jasmine's handwriting. I know where the twins go to daycare. I know what time you pick them up. I know the route you take home. Klaus will be watching. Always watching. Give me my children back, or I'll take yours. Rachel called the police immediately. The woman was arrested for communicating threats, but the damage was done. Rachel and Miles pulled the twins from daycare, hired round-the-clock security, and installed additional cameras covering every angle of their property. The stress was affecting everyone. Rachel's milk supply dropped and she struggled to feed the twins. Miles developed insomnia, checking the security feeds multiple times each night. I started varying my routes to their house, paranoid about being followed. Our parents aged years and weeks, the strain of protecting Jasmine's children while fearing their mother visible in every line on their faces. 3 months into Jasmine's sentence, she made a mistake. She'd been corresponding with multiple men through prison pen pal sites, promising each of them different things in exchange for their help. When 2 of them showed up to visit on the same day, a fight broke out in the visiting room. Both men were arrested, and Jasmine's male privileges were revoked. Without her ability to orchestrate harassment from inside, Jasmine grew desperate. She started picking fights with other inmates, hoping to extend her sentence and delay the inevitable. But the warden saw through her plan. Instead of additional charges, she was placed in solitary confinement for her own protection. Klaus, meanwhile, had violated his bail conditions by contacting Rachel's family. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but not before sending one final package to Rachel's house. Inside were hundreds of photos he'd taken over months. The family at parks, stores, restaurants. The detail was obsessive. Notes were written on the back of each photo, describing their activities. The prosecutor used the photos to file additional charges against both Caleb and Jasmine: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, based on the threat about taking the twins; criminal harassment; stalking by proxy. The charges would add years to Jasmine's sentence if convicted. Jasmine's public defender convinced her to take a plea deal in exchange for dropping the kidnapping conspiracy charge. She pled guilty to the harassment and stalking charges. Her sentence was extended by 3 years and she was transferred to a facility 500 miles away, making it harder for her to maintain local connections. Our parents made the difficult decision to file for permanent custody of Jasmine's children. The court proceedings were heartbreaking. The oldest child testified via closed-circuit TV about his mother's behavior, describing how she taught him to lie about Rachel, how she told him, "Aunt Rachel stole Daddy." The judge granted permanent custody to our parents, with Rachel and Miles named as guardians should anything happen to them. Darren, from prison, signed away his parental rights without contest. He wanted nothing to do with the children or the chaos Jasmine had created. His only request was that his name be removed from their birth certificates, a legal impossibility that showed how desperately he wanted to erase his connection to Jasmine. With Caleb in jail and Jasmine's communication limited, life slowly stabilized. Rachel and Miles maintained their security measures but began venturing out more. The twins started reaching developmental milestones, first smiles, rolling over, babbling, normal baby things that felt like victories after months of crisis. I helped our parents redecorate Jasmine's children's rooms, removing reminders of their chaotic past, and creating spaces that felt safe and permanent. The children responded well to stability and therapy. The oldest stopped having nightmares. The middle child began talking again. The youngest adapted quickly, calling our parents grandma and grandpa without prompting. 6 months after Jasmine's transfer, we received word that she'd been placed on suicide watch, not because she was actually suicidal, but because she'd been threatening self-harm to manipulate staff into giving her privileges. The psychiatrist's report was damning. Patient shows no genuine remorse, continues to blame others for her situation, and demonstrates persistent antisocial behavior patterns. Rachel made another difficult decision. She wrote to the prison, offering to pay for Jasmine to receive proper psychiatric treatment. Not for Jasmine's sake, but for her children, who deserved a mother who might someday be capable of healthy relationships. The offer was made through lawyers, maintaining the no-contact order while still extending help. Jasmine refused. She sent word through her lawyer that she didn't need help, that Rachel was the one who needed treatment for her jealousy and vindictiveness. Even faced with the consequences of her actions, she couldn't admit fault. The children continued to thrive with our parents. The oldest joined Little League. The middle child discovered a love of art. The youngest started preschool. Rachel and Miles were careful to maintain boundaries, but they included the children in family gatherings, ensuring they grew up knowing they were loved despite their parents' failures. A year into Jasmine's extended sentence, Caleb was released. He immediately left the state, apparently finding another incarcerated woman to attach himself to. The restraining orders remained in place, but his departure brought relief. One less threat to monitor. Jasmine found new ways to cause trouble. She filed lawsuits from prison, against Rachel for alienation of affection, against our parents for kidnapping her children, against Miles's company for conspiracy to commit fraud. Each suit was dismissed as frivolous, but they still required responses, still cost money and time. She also began writing a memoir about her wrongful persecution, finding a vanity publisher willing to print it for a fee. When excerpts appeared online, they were so obviously fabricated that even Jasmine's few remaining supporters distanced themselves. The book portrayed her as a victim of a vast conspiracy, with Rachel as the mastermind who'd planned her downfall since childhood. Our parents had to get a restraining order against the publisher when they tried to interview Jasmine's children for a sequel. The children's therapist testified that any contact with their mother's delusions would undo years of progress. The judge agreed, placing strict limits on any mention of the children in Jasmine's writings. Rachel's twins grew into curious, happy toddlers. They took their first steps, said their first words, developed distinct personalities. Alyssa was bold and adventurous, while Noah was thoughtful and cautious. Watching them grow felt like proof that life could move forward, that Jasmine's poison hadn't infected everything. But reminders persisted. Every legal document regarding the children had to be carefully worded to prevent Jasmine from finding loopholes. Every school registration required explanations about custody arrangements. Every medical appointment meant updating security protocols to prevent unauthorized access to records. Miles's business thrived despite the early challenges. His partners, impressed by how he'd handled the situation, gave him greater responsibilities. He used his success to ensure financial security for both sets of children, setting up trusts that Jasmine couldn't touch, even after her release. I found myself becoming the family historian, documenting the truth for when the children were old enough to understand, not to poison them against their mother, but to ensure they had facts when Jasmine inevitably tried to rewrite history. The therapist said having a clear, honest record would help them process their complicated family dynamics as adults. 2 years into her extended sentence, Jasmine was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder by the prison psychiatrist. The diagnosis surprised no one but Jasmine, who fired her lawyer for not preventing the evaluation. She continued to refuse treatment, insisting there was nothing wrong with her, that getting her children back wouldn't fix. Our parents struggled with guilt. They wondered if different choices might have prevented this outcome. Their therapist helped them understand that while they'd enabled Jasmine's behavior, her choices were her own. They couldn't have loved her into being a different person. Rachel rarely spoke about Jasmine anymore. When asked, she'd simply say her sister was away and change the subject. But I knew she checked the prison website regularly, monitoring Jasmine's release date, preparing for the inevitable return. The children grew more resilient each year. They knew their mother was in prison, but not the details. The therapist advised age-appropriate honesty, so they understood their mother had made bad choices, but wasn't a bad person. It was a delicate balance, protecting them while preparing them for future contact if Jasmine ever genuinely changed. 3 years passed. Caleb died in a hammered driving accident, removing one future threat. Darren was released on parole and immediately left the state, wanting no part of his former life. He never attempted contact with his children, biological or otherwise. Jasmine's behavior in prison gradually improved, not because she'd changed, but because she'd learned that good behavior meant earlier release. She attended required programs, worked in the prison library, and avoided major infractions. But letters to our parents revealed her true thoughts. Elaborate plans for regaining custody, forcing Rachel to pay for her crimes, and reclaiming her stolen life. As Jasmine's release date approached, Rachel and Miles made preparations. They upgraded security systems, renewed restraining orders, and created detailed safety plans. The children's schools were notified, with Jasmine's photo distributed to all staff. It felt like preparing for a storm, necessary but exhausting. Our parents decided to move. They found a house in a gated community 2 hours away, far enough to discourage casual harassment, but close enough to maintain family connections. The children adjusted well, making new friends and thriving in their new schools. Rachel helped with the move, packing years of memories while trying not to think about why it was necessary. In Jasmine's old room, she found a box of childhood photos. The two of them at birthday parties, family vacations, school events, before everything went wrong. She kept one photo, tucked it away in a drawer. A reminder of the sister she'd once had, before jealousy and hatred consumed her. The twins started preschool, a milestone that felt monumental after everything. Rachel watched them run into their classroom, backpacks bouncing, and felt a moment of pure joy. They were growing up free from the poison that had infected her childhood. That alone made everything worth it. As Jasmine's release date drew closer, the family attorney filed for permanent restraining orders. The judge, reviewing the extensive history, granted them without hesitation. Jasmine would be legally barred from contacting Rachel, Miles, their children, or our parents. Violating the orders would mean immediate return to prison. A month before Jasmine's release, she sent one final letter to our parents through her lawyer. She claimed to have found religion, to have changed, to want only to make amends. She begged for one chance to see her children, promising she'd respect all boundaries. Our parents, on advice from the children's therapist, declined. Trust, once shattered so completely, couldn't be rebuilt with words. The children, now older and more aware, began asking harder questions. Why couldn't they see their mother? Why did she do bad things? Our parents answered honestly but gently, focusing on the importance of choices and consequences. The oldest, now 8, nodded solemnly and said he understood. The younger two accepted the simple explanation that mommy needed to learn how to be kind before she could visit. Rachel's twins flourished, unaware of the drama that had preceded their birth. They played with their cousins at family gatherings, the children forming bonds that transcended their complicated origins. Watching them together, it was possible to imagine a future where the past didn't define everything. The week before Jasmine's release, Rachel and Miles took a vacation. They needed distance, physical and emotional, from what was coming. I stayed with our parents, helping them prepare for whatever Jasmine might do upon release. We installed new locks, updated emergency contact lists, and practiced safety protocols with the children. Jasmine was released on a Tuesday morning. By noon, she'd already violated parole by attempting to access her children's school records online. Her parole officer warned her once. By evening she'd been caught driving past her parents' old house, apparently unaware they'd moved. Strike 2. She lasted 3 days. On Friday she appeared at Rachel's empty house. They were still on vacation, screaming at the windows, demanding her life back. Neighbors called police. When officers arrived, Jasmine attacked them, clawing and biting like a wild animal. She was arrested for assault, parole violation, and violating the restraining order. This time, the judge showed no leniency. Jasmine was sentenced to 5 more years, the maximum for her violations. As they led her away, she screamed that she'd never stop, that Rachel would pay, that the children belonged to her. The courtroom clerk later told me it was the worst meltdown she'd seen in 20 years. Rachel and Miles returned from vacation to find their home undamaged but surrounded by police tape. The security footage showed Jasmine trying every window and door, growing increasingly frantic when she couldn't get in. It was disturbing to watch. This person who shared Rachel's DNA reduced to such desperate madness. Our parents felt relief mixed with profound sadness. Their daughter was gone, replaced by someone they didn't recognize. They continued therapy, working through grief for the child Jasmine had been and acceptance of the person she'd become. The therapist reminded them that protecting the grandchildren was their priority now. Those grandchildren continued to thrive. They joined sports teams, excelled in school, made friends. Normal childhood experiences that felt like miracles considering their origins. Rachel and Miles were the fun aunt and uncle who attended every game and recital, providing stability and love without overstepping boundaries. Life settled into new rhythms, birthday parties without fear of disruption, holidays celebrated in peace, family dinners where laughter replaced tension. The scars remained but no longer defined daily existence. Jasmine's children began to understand their story in age-appropriate ways. The oldest wrote a school essay about choosing kindness over anger, clearly processing his experiences. The middle child's art evolved from dark scribbles to bright landscapes. The youngest, with no memory of chaos, simply grew up loved and secure. Rachel rarely mentioned Jasmine anymore. When she did, it was with sadness rather than anger. She chose hatred, she'd say simply. I chose happiness. And she had. Despite everything Jasmine had tried to steal or destroy, Rachel had built a beautiful life. The twins started kindergarten, riding the bus with their cousins. Watching them board together, backpacks almost bigger than they were, our parents cried happy tears. This time, the family had survived, transformed but intact. Jasmine would serve her time and probably be released again someday. She'd likely violate parole again, return to prison again, repeat the cycle until age or exhaustion stopped her. But her power was gone. The family had learned to live without fear, to find joy despite her existence. In the end, Jasmine had been right about one thing. Rachel had won. Not through manipulation or cruelty, but by choosing love over hate, building instead of destroying, protecting what mattered most. The twins' laughter echoed through the house, proof that life, real life, had triumphed over Jasmine's poison. Our family story wasn't unique. Toxic people exist in many families, causing pain and chaos until others learn to protect themselves. But survival was possible. Happiness was possible. Even after everything, love endured. As I finished writing this account, I realized Jasmine had given us an unexpected gift. In trying to destroy Rachel, she'd revealed our family's strength. We'd faced the worst and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. That was its own victory. The children were calling for dinner, normal voices on a normal evening in a normal home. Fiancé wore my pink diamond, while sleeping with two men at her hen's party. I quietly canceled the wedding and blocked her from my life forever. I am a 29-year-old mining engineer, FIFO life, 2 weeks on site and 1 week off. If you use your money wisely, you can make a fortune. I have 2 investment houses in Perth and another in Fremantle, as well as enough savings to retire at 40 if I wanted to. I don't show it off though, I never understood the point. I met Olivia 3 years ago at a friend's cookout in Kislow. She was 24, working as a pharmaceutical sales representative and trying to grow her Instagram following on the side. When we met, she had about 3,000 followers and was always uploading training videos and sponsored supplement ads. I didn't care about that, but she was lovely, amusing, and appeared genuine. First woman I dated who understood the FIFO lifestyle and did not complain about my absence. We moved quickly. She moved into my Subiaco home after 6 months. I taught her about property investment and assisted her in saving for her first deposit. She taught me to relax more and enjoy the money I was earning rather than simply accumulating it. I assumed we balanced each other out. Last December, I brought her to Rottnest Island and proposed at sunset near the lighthouse. Private photo and everything. She received her Instagram content. I got to witness her genuine happiness. The ring cost $15,000 and was specifically crafted with a rare pink diamond from the Argyle mine before it closed. She cried, said yes, tweeted about it for weeks, and referred to it as her forever rock. The wedding was scheduled for November at a winery in Margaret River. Small, pricey, and precisely what she wanted. She did the most of the planning while I was on location. I simply transferred funds as needed. Her hen's weekend took place last weekend on the Gold Coast with 8 of her girlfriends. I arrived on site in the Pilbara halfway through my swing. She texted me continuously the first night, sending me images from dinner and videos from a male strip show, saying she missed me and couldn't wait to be my wife. Saturday night, the texts ceased. I assumed they were out late. I didn't think much of it. Sunday morning, 5 a.m., I'm preparing for pre-start when I notice Lane's Instagram story. Lane has been her best friend since high school and serves as her maid of honor. I always felt she was trashy with those artificial lips, constantly causing trouble. The type who captures everything for content. Only close pals have access to the story. Olivia must have said that I don't use Instagram much. I probably didn't expect to see it, but I followed Lane since Olivia requested me to support her friends' accounts. The video was 47 seconds long. It was clearly filmed in a hotel room, and you could see the Q1 building through the windows. Lane's intoxicated voice narrates when the bride-to-be says, "One last adventure before lockdown," as the camera pans to the bed. Olivia on all fours. Travis behind her, her F-45 trainer, who she said was just incredibly good at his job. Josh in front, some guy from her gym she introduced me to once. He was basically gay. Don't worry, babe. Both of them. Her engagement ring caught the light while she gripped the blankets. The worst aspect wasn't the act. It was her expression. She was having a great time, looking directly at the camera at one point, laughing without being intoxicated, sloppy focused, energetic, and even sporty. Lane zooms in on the ring, which she is still wearing. Loyalty queen. Other girls were giggling in the background, and someone said, "Nathan could never compete with that combo." I watched it 3 times, screen taped it, and sat in my donga for an hour before the start simply thinking. I didn't toss my phone, punch anything, or experience the wrath you'd expect. It felt more like clarity, like when you're troubleshooting an equipment issue and suddenly realize exactly where the system broke. I went to work, drove an excavator for 12 hours, chatted with the boys at Smoko, and ate dinner in the mess. Nobody realized anything was unusual, but I was already plotting. Olivia never understood this about me. I am not emotional. I am systematic. Each problem has a solution, every action has an optimum reaction, and I had 4 days left on site to plan mine. I began with logistics. I paid the $8,000 deposit to the wedding site in Margaret River. The entire amount of $27,000 was due following week. I emailed them about a family situation that required a postponement. They were kind and offered to store our deposit till a future date. The catering firm in Perth offers a complete refund with 30 days notice. I've also sent that email. The Bali honeymoon was 2 weeks at a private villa in Ubud, booked flexible through my Amex Platinum. It could be postponed indefinitely, with no need for cancellation. The photographer, flowers and DJ were all handled via short emails, claiming unexpected family circumstances. Then I thought of the ring. She adored the ring more than anything else. She posted about it all the time, and her followers never stopped commenting on it. It was her trophy, proof that she had succeeded by landing a wealthy man who was willing to commit. I texted her on Wednesday. "Hey babe, I've been thinking about the wedding and want to get the ring professionally cleaned and serviced before the big day. The jeweler in Perth can do the pink diamond treatment while I'm back. Can you leave it on the kitchen counter? I'll grab it when I fly in on Friday." Her response: "Of course, baby." That's so thoughtful. Can't wait to see you Friday. Last weekend was fun, but I missed you so much. Girls are jealous of how good you are to me. I wanted to throw my phone into the crusher. Instead I said, "I love you too, see you soon." Friday arrived. We flew back to Perth around 6 a.m. She was at work, and pharmaceutical sales meant Friday meetings. I had the house to myself until about 6 p.m. The ring sat on the kitchen counter in its box, with a message saying, "Can't wait to wear this forever, your future wife." I pocketed it. Then I started to work. I didn't trash anything of hers. I didn't chop up garments or throw stuff away. That's poor emotional conduct. Instead, I packed my belongings. It's just mine. My paperwork, watches, grandfather's battle medals, and signed Dockers jerseys were the things that mattered. I loaded 3 suitcases into my Land Cruiser and drove them to my investment property in Fremantle. It's been lying empty as I waited for the rental market to improve. It's fully furnished and ready to move in. I returned to the Subiaco mansion. Everything appeared normal, her belongings untouched, her makeup on the bathroom counter, her exercise clothes on the bedroom floor, as if I hadn't started packing. Then I performed digital surgery, disabled her phone number, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Blocked her entire family, her parents, her sister in Melbourne, and her cousin, who was constantly asking for property advice. I blocked all 8 girls from the hen weekend. I blocked Travis and Josh, even though I doubt they were aware she was engaged. I removed myself from all shared streaming services and reset my Netflix, Stan, and Spotify passwords. I removed her from my life insurance and superannuation beneficiaries. I canceled her extra credit card from my account. I called my lawyer brother Daniel, told him exactly what happened, and sent him the tape. He prayed, Jesus Christ, Cal, what do you need? Just be ready. She's going to explode when she figures it out. You want to confront her? No, I want to disappear. He knew right once. That's why Daniel excels at his profession. I left the house at 4 p.m., drove to Fremantle, and texted my site supervisor stating I needed to return early due to a family issue. FIFO workers have more leeway in this regard. He approved me for the return flight on Sunday. Olivia texted me at 6:30 p.m. Home. Where are you, babe? Want to grab dinner at that Japanese place? I did not respond. 7 p.m. Cal. 7:30 p.m. Are you okay? I'm worried. 8 p.m. Your phone must be dead. I'll order Thai for when you get home. 9 p.m. Nathan, this isn't funny. 10 p.m. If you don't answer, I'll call the cops. 11 p.m. 15 missed calls. Saturday morning, she realized she was blocked. That's when the true panic began. But here's the thing about properly blocking someone. They have no idea if you've blocked them, or if your phone was turned off at first. She probably wasted hours assuming it was a network issue. By Saturday afternoon, she'd figured out something was awry and began ringing my parents in Adelaide. They knew nothing because I hadn't told them yet. I called Daniel. He said he had not heard from me in weeks. I called my company's headquarters. They said I was on site and could not be reached. She arrived at my workplace in Perth on Monday morning, but security informed her that I was not present. She created a scene, and they let her out. She tried to contact my site supervisor from the parking lot. He stated that I was dealing with a family emergency and could not be contacted. That's when she shared a TikTok video of herself crying in her car, makeup wrecked. My fiancé has disappeared. We're supposed to get married next month and he's just gone. No explanation, nothing. If you know Nathan, please tell him to just talk to me. I don't understand what's happening. 67,000 views in 3 hours. The comments were divided. Half called me a sociopath, half said there had to be more to the tale. Her parents called Daniel and threatened legal action over the wedding deposit. He gently stated that there were no contracts in their daughter's name, and any deposits made were non-refundable presents from me to her. They could take civil action, but the cost would outweigh the recovery. She found out the wedding had been cancelled on Tuesday, when the venue called to confirm the postponement I had requested. TikTok video number 2. He cancelled our wedding without telling me, had 240,000 views. The drama helped her establish a following. People are requesting updates and tea. Update 1. Lane received the video 3 days later. When something becomes viral on TikTok, people dig. They found Olivia's Instagram, her tagged pals, and Lane's account. Someone observed that Lane's tail highlights from the Gold Coast weekend had been erased. Screenshots of Lane from the same hotel and on the same dates began to circulate. They put it together. The comments began. Why'd your MO delete her stories from the hens? Something happened in Gold Coast. She cheated, calling it now. Lane snapped Wednesday night. Phoned Olivia sobbing and admitting she'd posted something stupid while drinking. Olivia demanded to see it. Lane had deleted it, but it had already been screen captured and forwarded to Olivia. That's when Olivia realized I knew. She did not try to dispute it. Instead, she focused on damage management. Posted TikTok number 3. I made a mistake. One foolish night. I was drunk. I was stressed. It meant nothing. But he watched a video, and instead of talking to me like an adult, he disappeared. 3 years together, and he couldn't even have a discussion with me. That's the true betrayal. Her supporters went on to claim that everyone deserves a second chance, and that I was cruel for ghosting them. Others pointed out that she was railed by 2 men while wearing her engagement ring. Someone discovered Travis's Instagram. His bio stated, engaged to at FitBeck91. They tagged his girlfriend Hannah in Olivia's video. Hannah noticed it Thursday morning. By lunchtime she'd torched all of Travis's training gear in an Instagram live bonfire, tagged F45, and told his whole client list that he was a cheating piece of SHT who F-ed women. F45 dismissed him that afternoon. Josh's girlfriend learned the same thing. She didn't go public. Instead, she gently kicked him out of their flat and told his entire rugby club why. He was benched indefinitely for conduct damaging to the team's reputation. Meanwhile, I was back on site working 12-hour shifts with no phone reception in the pit. Perfect seclusion. The boys were aware of what was going on, but did not pursue it. That's the thing about FIFO crews. Everyone is running from something. G eventually inquired Thursday night at dinner. You good, mate? Yeah, just handling some sh*t. Need anything? Nah, it's all sorted. And it was. Every time I got angry, I'd think about her expression when she learns the ring is no longer there, when she realizes I witnessed everything but decided to say nothing, and when she realizes silence is the cruelest response to treachery. Daniel called me on his satellite phone Friday morning. She's getting desperate. Cal showed up at Mom and Dad's. What did they do? Dad warned her to leave his land. Mom cried but didn't let her in. I've got everything documented if you need a restraining order. Not yet. Let her burn herself out. She's destroyed on social media and lost about 4,000 followers after people found out what she did. Good. You sure you don't want to say anything? Just tell her it's over. She knows it's over. She figured that out when I blocked her. What she wants is an explanation, a battle and some drama to make herself the victim. I'm not giving her that satisfaction. Cold as ice, brother. No, simply done. Update 2. A week later, the pharmaceutical business dismissed her. It turns out that when you go viral for being a cheater, and your F-45 trainer side piece is publicly exposed and includes your workplace in the controversy, HR pays attention. They described it as conduct incompatible with company ideals and detrimental to corporate reputation. She recorded TikTok number 4 from her car, absolutely breaking down. I've lost everything. My fiancé, my job, my life, over one mistake. One mistake. The video received 1.2 million views. People were unaware that I was buddies with Oliver, one of her area managers. We met at a business golf event that she had dragged me to. Sunday night, he called me on the satellite phone. Mate, I had to let her go. The video went around the entire company. Doctors were asking if that was our rep. She became a liability. I didn't ask you to fire her. I know, but between you and me, she was already on thin ice, coming in late, missing client meetings. This was just the excuse we needed. Cheers for letting me know. You doing all right? Never better. That's what I said. The clarity was outstanding. No more wedding planning stress. No more pretending to be concerned about her Instagram engagement. No more listening to her rant about other girls at the gym while effing 2 guys from the same gym. She began showing up at my parents' home in Adelaide. He contacted me on Monday. She flew here. Cal showed up at the door crying. What did you tell her? Nothing. Your mother wanted to let her explain, but I said if she steps on our property again, I'll call the police. Thanks, Dad. Are you sure you handled this correctly? Have you seen the video? Daniel showed me. Effing HL, son. Then yes, I handled it correctly. Your mother believes you should formally end the relationship. She wore my ring while 2 guys raced through her, so she knows it's over. On Tuesday, she tried a new strategy. She messaged my friends, the ones she could still reach, and told them her side. She wasn't sober. This was a mistake. She felt pressured by the females. She had no recollection of what had happened. Most of them quickly blocked her, but my friend Mason called on Wednesday. Bro, she's saying you're having a mental breakdown, that this is about your FIFO depression and not about what happened. What do you think? I think she's desperate, but, just so you know, she's trying to flip the narrative. Let her. Anyone who believes her was never my friend. Anyway, she was losing followers on a regular basis, down to around 8,000 from a height of 15,000. The sponsorship deals have dried up. The protein powder manufacturer dumped her. The sportswear brand removed their affiliate code. Thursday, she did something unexpected. She went to the jeweler. The shop where I bought the ring walked in and demanded to know if I had brought it in for cleaning. The owner immediately called me. Mr. Nathan, your ex-fiancée is here asking about a ring. I'm not a customer anymore. I don't know what she's talking about. Understood, sir. I'll handle it. He informed her he couldn't divulge any customer information. She made a disturbance, and security removed her. Another TikTok followed. He stole my engagement ring. It's mine. The comments devastated her. You have lost ring privileges when you have 2 guys wearing it. That's his property, sweetheart. The audacity of this woman. Her parents threatened Daniel with theft charges. He sent them a single message. The ring was a conditional gift that required marriage. No wedding, no ring. Google the law on engagement rings in Australia. Stop contacting my client. They paused. Update 3. 2 weeks later, she discovered where I was staying. I'm not sure how she did it. Perhaps she hired someone or discovered I had moved to one of my investment properties. But on Sunday morning, during my weekend off, she was at my door in Fremantle. I observed her through the security camera. She had unclean hair, no makeup, and was wearing the same Lululemon set I bought her for Christmas last year. She knocked for 20 minutes. Cal, please. I know you're in there. Your car is here. Just talk to me. 5 minutes, please. I cooked myself breakfast and watched Formula One. She continued knocking. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. I'll stay here all day. I phoned the cops and informed them that my ex was harassing me on my property, that I had footage of her infidelity, and that she wouldn't leave. They arrived in 15 minutes. I saw through the camera as they instructed her to depart. She argued. They informed her she was trespassing. She cried. They led her to her car and followed her out of the area. Naturally, she made a post about it. I couldn't remember if this was TikTok number 7 or 8. He called the cops on me for wanting to talk. Someone in the comments shared a screen recording of her Gold Coast footage. Every time she erased it, someone else reposted it. The internet does not forget. On Monday, her mother called Daniel. This time, the approach is different, with crying and begging. Their daughter was still in need of closure. Could he merely pass along a message? Daniel called me. Your call, mate. I can tell her to F off. What's the message? She wants you to know she's sorry, that she loves you, and that she'll do anything to fix this. Tell her mother I got the message, nothing else. That's it? That's it. The calls stopped, but the TikToks did not. She began releasing old recordings of our joyful moments, our engagement, and the trips we did in an attempt to portray what we had before I abandoned her. The comments were savage. He didn't abandon you. You cheated. Imagine posting this thinking you're the victim. The delusion is real. Her number of followers fell to 5,000. Hannah, Travis's fiancée, contacted me on LinkedIn and expressed her gratitude for exposing him, despite the fact that I did not do so directly. I was told Olivia had been effing him for months. They would meet after training every Tuesday and Thursday while I was on site. I did not answer, but I screenshotted it. Josh attempted to contact me and left a voicemail. Mate, I'm sorry. She said you guys were open when you were away. I didn't know she was lying. I deleted it. I don't care about his excuses. On Thursday, Olivia tried something new. I posted a snapshot of a positive pregnancy test on Instagram with the statement, maybe this will make him talk to me. My phone exploded with messages from friends and relatives asking whether it was true. Daniel handled it. He made a single call. If you're pregnant, provide medical documentation. We'll arrange a paternity test. If you're lying about this, it's defamation and emotional manipulation. Your choice. She withdrew the post within an hour and issued an explanation, claiming she was emotional and made an error with an old photo. Her following fell to 3,000. Update 4. 1 month later, she flew to the place. I'm still not sure how she found out which site I was at. We have operations all throughout Washington, but she flew to Newman, rented a car and went to the Mines Gate. Security phoned me. Nathan, there's a woman here claiming to be your fiancé. She says it's a family emergency. I don't have a fiancé. Don't let her in. Copy that. She sat outside the gate for 6 hours in 40-degree heat. Security had to contact the cops again. They drove her back to Newman and made sure she boarded a flight to Perth. That video went differently. No tears, just wrath. He's a coward, an effing coward who can't face me. The comments escalated into, this is harassment now. Leave the man alone. This is getting concerning. She lost her flat without a job, couldn't afford the rent in Subiaco, and had to move back with her parents in Sydney. She posted about it as if she were the victim of a tragedy. Her sister told Daniel, you've ruined her life. She ruined her own life. I just didn't stick around to watch. She made one mistake. Getting railed by 2 guys while wearing my client's ring isn't a mistake, it's a choice. Multiple choices, actually. You're heartless. No, we're just done here. I was having a great time. Picked up extra shifts because the pay was outrageous with all the overtime. I started searching at commercial properties in Perth's central business district. The boys on the scene knew the entire story once someone discovered the TikToks. They thought it was effing folklore. Most blokes would have gone psycho, G told me over drinks one night. You just evaporated. What's the point of going psycho? Changes nothing. Yeah, but don't you want to tell her what a cut she is? Every morning when she wakes up at her parents' house, unemployed and with 2,000 followers, she knows. The wedding date, November 15th, passed. She shared a photo from 3 years ago of us at the cookout where we met. Today should have been our wedding day. I'll never understand how someone can go 3 years without saying anything. Someone commented on the Gold Coast video again, and she turned them off. Her follower count fell to 1,500. All of the engagement pods and paid followers had abandoned ship. Update 5. 3 months later, I sold the ring for $11,000 to a dealer in Perth. The pink diamond retained its worth nicely. The money was used to fund a trip to Bali for the lads. 8 of us stayed in the exact villa Olivia and I had reserved for our honeymoon. I posted a photo on Facebook of all of us with drinks at sunset and tagged the resort. I didn't mention her. I didn't need to. She would know. She knew. TikTok number 15. He's at our honeymoon spot with his friends. This is psychopathic behavior. The responses were overwhelmingly against her. You're the psychopath. Still posting about him, move on already. This is embarrassing. Her account dwindled to 800 followers. Daniel sent me a 10-page letter she had handwritten. I destroyed it without reading it, videotaped the process, and sent it to Daniel. He comprehended the message to be passed on. She tried once more, creating a phony LinkedIn profile and messaging me about a business opportunity. The profile picture was a generic shot, but the wording was entirely her own, discussing closure, healing, and forgiveness. I reported the profile. LinkedIn prohibited it. Then silence for the first time in 3 months. Nothing. There are no posts, no messages sent through third parties, no appearances at events, nothing. I purchased another investment property, a decent 2-bedroom in Scarborough near the ocean. She always wanted us to buy a property together. I paid in cash using my site money, plus what I had saved from the cancelled wedding. Emma, a geologist from the site, started seeing me informally. No social media, no drama, just simple chat and amazing sex. This is just what I needed. One of my friends ran into Olivia in Sydney last week. She was working at a vitamin shop in a mall and living with her parents. There is no ring, obviously. He claims to be looking tough as F. She asked about me, and he stated he no longer knew me. She began crying in the middle of Westfield. He walked away. Her Instagram has been disabled. TikTok also offers entire digital SCD. Final update. 6 months later, I'm writing from my Scarborough apartment. I just witnessed the sunset from my balcony. Life is good. Better than good, honestly. The properties are all doing well. The Perth market is heating up. My portfolio is currently worth around $3.2 million, which is not bad for a 30-year-old FIFO worker. Emma and I are still informal, which is wonderful. She'll be moving to Canada for a 6-month contract soon. We'll probably finish it there, with no harsh feelings. That's the appeal of being with someone who understands the game. Daniel called yesterday, and Olivia's lawyer reached out one final time. She wants to properly apologize and get closure. Daniel informed them that his client's position had not changed. No communication, ever. Here's what 3 years with Olivia taught me. When someone demonstrates who they are, believe them. More significantly, when someone reveals who they are, you are not obligated to discuss it with them. She believed the ring made her untouchable, and that wearing it while effing other guys was a power move, demonstrating that she could do whatever she wanted and I would still be there. The ring was meant to provide her security. Rather, it became proof. Every time I considered responding to her, I remembered the video of her staring at the camera, laughing, the ring catching the light, her exuberance, and the joy in her deception. That's who she truly was, not the woman who cried at my proposal, not the one who said she understood my FIFO lifestyle, and not the one who vowed to love me forever. She was the woman who was mocked by 2 men while her companions cheered her on, wearing my ring like a prize. So I gave her what she really deserved. Nothing. Not fury, which would have fueled her victimhood narrative. Not forgiveness, which would have justified her mistake. Not even an acknowledgement of her existence. Just nothing. The fellas on site ask if I regret not confronting her and if I missed out on closure. But here's the thing. Closure is something you create for yourself, not something you get from others. I took mine as soon as I blocked her number and headed to Fremantle. She wanted a chat because she wanted to control the story in order to explain, justify and downplay what she did, perhaps making me the bad guy for not fighting for us. Instead, she got to explain to everyone why her fiancé fled, watch her life crumble in real time on social media, and experience what true consequences are like. According to what I've heard, she recently relocated to Brisbane for a fresh start. Good luck to whoever she scams next, though I doubt she'll find another FIFO worker foolish enough to put a $15,000 ring on her finger. Daniel inquired if I had ever loved her. Yes, I did. I loved who I believed she was. But she didn't exist. She was simply better at acting than I was at seeing through it. The wedding would have taken place last month on November 15th. I was on site working a double shift. After penalties, I made $3,800 that day, and used it to buy another Rolex, which truly keeps its worth. People periodically message me, claiming they witnessed the entire incident on TikTok and proclaiming me a legend for how I handled it. I do not respond to those either. I am not a legend. I'm just a guy who refuses to play a silly game. The ring is presumably on someone else's finger right now. I hope they have more luck with it than Olivia did. But given what that ring witnessed, I believe it is cursed. She'll read this eventually. She always figures out what I'm doing. So Olivia, if you're reading this, know this. You didn't lose me because of a single error. You have lost me because of who you are. The Gold Coast has just revealed it, and each day you spent attempting to get me to speak was another day you proved I made the right decision. I don't detest you, that would necessitate compassion. I have nothing against you. You are a lesson learnt, a bullet dodged, and a 3-year investment that did not pay off. This happens. But the ring was mine. Purchased with my money, given on condition, and legitimately returned. Every time you think about it, remember that you wore it while betraying me, and it is now gone forever, just like me. Anyway, I have a flight to catch, return to the location tomorrow for another swing, another 40 grand. The guys want to know about the Bali trip. Life continues without you. Edit. Since people keep asking this is true. I don't care if you believe it or not. I don't feel guilty about her losing her job. Actions have consequences. The video exists. However, I am not sharing it. I'm not a complete jerk. To those who said I should have been a man and challenged her, I was acting like one. A man who values himself enough to walk away from rubbish. For those curious about the legal aspects of engagement rings, Washington law states unequivocally that they are conditional gifts. No marriage means that the ring is returned to the purchaser. Yes, I started therapy 2 months ago, not because of her, but because FIFO living messes with your mind. The best decision I've made. To everyone who shared similar stories, you deserved more. We all did. And best of luck to the person who messaged Olivia claiming to be her new lover. You will need it. I'm finished with updates. This chapter is now closed. It's time to write a better one. Goodbye. Thank you for staying till the end. If you appreciate our videos, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Mother-in-law gave iPhones to every grandchild except my daughter. She's not blood, so I replied, pack your bags and get out of my house. These are for the family, sweetheart. My mother-in-law's remarks pierced the air like shattered glass as my 8-year-old daughter peered at the iPhone 16 Pro Max that she had just distributed to the other children. The hush that ensued was deafening. 20 people were in my living room in the house I bought, watching her purposefully exclude my small kid from the most costly family gift of the year. Why isn't there one for me, grandmother? My kid inquired with that soul-crushing innocence. Because you are not truly a family treasure. These are exclusively for my blood grandchildren. The sound of my daughter running upstairs wailing, mixed with the visitor's uneasy laughing. When I approached my mother-in-law, she simply shrugged. This is my money. I will give it to anybody I choose. My wife returned home from her trip the following day. Her reaction froze my blood. Mom is just old. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. You're overreacting, as usual. That night, everything changed. I informed my wife that she had 24 hours to make a decision. Either your mother leaves my house, or you accompany her. The first combat occurred at daybreak. My wife discovered me in the kitchen, pouring coffee with the calm of someone who has already taken a final decision. You can't just put her out on the street, she yelled in that high-pitched voice she had when she was losing control. She's my mom. She is old. I said without raising my voice. This is my house. The deadline cannot be negotiated. So what is she supposed to do? Live on the streets? She should have thought about that before humiliating my daughter. The slight was intended for the little girl you've reared since she was 2. The tiny girl who calls you mom. I could see her face crumble as I put it into perspective. However, the period of vulnerability lasted only seconds before familial loyalty closed ranks. My mother-in-law became emboldened by my wife's backing and shut herself in the guest suite. When I went down to remind her that she only had 18 hours left, she smiled, which chilled my blood. I am not going anywhere, I have tenancy rights. Her voice was filled with the confidence that only legal ignorance can bring. And if you try anything, I will call the cops for domestic violence. My wife became her personal servant, delivering her meals and serving as a human shield. Leave her alone, she would tell me whenever I reached that part of the house. She is already stressed enough. That afternoon, I made the call that changed everything. My lawyer confirmed what I had suspected. A legal eviction could take several months. He advised me, as a professional who fees by the minute, To record every breath that woman takes in your home. Every insult, every threat, every time she spits at you. In hostile eviction proceedings, the one with the best paperwork wins. That night, I generated a password-protected digital file. I dubbed it a war diary and began to log everything. Date, time, and complete description. Each slam of the delicious door. Every veiled insult she mumbled as I walked past the kitchen. Every time my daughter came downstairs, she cried because Grandma refused to communicate to me. The first revelation occurred when I reviewed the bank statements. My wife had given her the debit card. The charges were outrageous. Amazon charges $340 for a premium coffee maker shipped directly to the apartment. $180 for Korean skincare goods. Premium vitamin supplements cost $95. Seriously, I showed the statement to my wife. You're giving her money for what she did to our daughter. She replied, without looking me in the eye, about their medical expenses. She is old. She requires things. I documented each transaction. Each expensive purchase added another line to my file, proving that there was no humility or guilt. The nuclear escalation occurred a week later. A social worker from Child Protective Services knocked on my home, bringing an anonymous complaint. Serious home tensions create an unstable and potentially dangerous setting for a kid. When I carefully presented the problem, giving copies of my initial diary as proof of a pattern of antagonism and emotional abuse against my daughter, her attitude changed dramatically. Before leaving, she stated that the individual who created this report supplied very particular information on your residence. Details that only someone who lives here would know. When I showed my wife the report, she refused to believe it. It must have been someone else. You're making up stories to turn me against my mother. Her eyes glowed with the blazing wrath that occurs when reality collides with denial. That night, I mounted security cameras around the communal spaces. It is a suggestion from the social worker. I informed them during supper to ensure transparency in the household. My wife could not object. My mother-in-law became pallid. I served the formal eviction notice the next day. 30 days. The official clock had started ticking. The house was turned into a Cold War zone. My wife retreated to the living room sofa and refused to share a bed with me. Our daughter was stuck in a deafening quiet. But in the midst of the chaos, I did something that left me feeling odd. I discreetly got my daughter the new iPhone 16 Pro Max. I handed it to her in her room. The box is wrapped in basic gift paper. This is from Dad, I replied, holding her as her eyes welled up with delighted emotions. But keep it a secret for now, okay? So we don't cause more difficulty. It was my way of safeguarding her in the midst of the commotion, of reminding her that no matter what occurred, she was my top priority. As I examined the camera footage each night, I knew something. This was more than just kicking my mother-in-law out. My goal had altered. I wanted to free my wife from her own denial before it was too late for all three of us. The official eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a sheriff who appeared more uncomfortable than we were. 30 days. The conflict has become official. My mother-in-law accepted the document with a smile that chilled my blood. She gave me 30 days to locate an excellent lawyer who would teach me who was truly in power here, waving the paper like confetti. The cameras I'd installed proved to be my salvation. The first capture occurred that same afternoon. I was examining the recordings when I overheard my mother-in-law conversing with my wife in the kitchen. When this idiot runs out of money to hire lawyers, he will give up. Furthermore, this home should be yours by right. You are my daughter, not him. My wife whispered something inaudible, but she did not contradict herself. I saved the file immediately. The second capture occurred 2 days later. I caught her accidentally scratching the hardwood floor in the living room with one of her large luggage, which she dragged with deliberate force while staring directly at me. When I feigned not to notice, she smiled and continued doing it. What exactly happened here? I asked my wife that night, pointing to the marks. It must have been an accident. Mom has arthritis. She is not very good at carrying things. But I had the video. Every intentional action, every malicious smile. The third capture changed everything. The hallway camera captured her entering my office when she assumed no one was present. I saw her walk through my desk, unlock drawers, and ultimately take a pair of silver cufflinks that belonged to my father and place them in her pocketbook. When I told my wife that things were missing, her response revealed how lost she was. I'm sure she merely stashed them somewhere secure so they don't get lost among all the attorneys and papers. My wife had passed a line. It was no longer simply denial, there was active complicity. The final straw came a week later. I was working from home when I heard cries in the garden. I dashed out and saw my kid screaming beside the water, completely soaking with her clothing on. What happened? I yelled at my mother-in-law who was standing on the edge, arms crossed. She slipped, she added with a nasty smile I recognized all too well. She was running where she should not have been. My daughter trembled in my arms. Daddy, I didn't slip. Grandma pushed me because I told her I didn't love her anymore. Children lie all the time, my mother-in-law responded, especially those who haven't learned to respect their elders. That night, while I dried my daughter's hair, I took a life-changing decision. It was time to put a stop to this farce. My mother-in-law had gone for a walk, most likely to complain to a neighbor about how terrible I was. I waited for the right moment to tell my wife that I wanted to have a truce night to talk and sort things out like adults. I ordered her favorite food from that Thai restaurant she adored, placed candles on the dining room table, and created a false hope atmosphere. We had the house to ourselves. My wife sat at the table with a hesitant face, as if anticipating an apology or a capitulation. Her hands were clenched, frightened but hopeful. I didn't say anything at first, simply turning on the dining room TV and connecting my laptop. She inquired. I want to show you something, I said with the calm that comes from holding all the cards. The first video began to play, with her mother telling her that the house should be hers by right, and that I was an idiot who would give up. I watched my wife's face tense. This must be out of context, she murmured, but her voice no longer sounded convinced. Wait, there's more. The second video showed the deliberate sabotage of the floor, every calculated movement, every defiant look at the camera. My wife started shaking her head, but her eyes were fixed on the screen. The third video was the final blow, the theft of my father's cufflinks, which was clear, sharp, and undeniable. I saw her open my desk, specifically look for those items, and hide them in her purse. My wife fell silent, her mouth agape. And this, I said, playing the audio my lawyer had legally obtained, is the call to Child Protective Services. My mother-in-law's voice was unmistakable. Yes, I want to report a dangerous situation for a minor. The stepfather is creating a hostile and violent environment, and the child is at risk. My wife's house of cards, built on denial, collapsed in an instant. I watched her face go through all the stages: shock, comprehension, pain, anger. She burst into tears, but these tears were different. She wasn't crying for her mother or the situation. She was crying for her own blindness, for the pain she had allowed to be inflicted on the child she had raised as her own, for the betrayal she had unwittingly enabled. Oh my God, she said quietly. How could I have been so blind? How could I allow her to do this to our daughter? At that point, we heard the front door close. My mother-in-law had returned from her walk, likely satisfied with poisoning another neighbor against me. My wife brushed away her tears and rose from the table with a drive I hadn't seen in years. She strode toward the guest suite with steps that sounded like hammer blows. I followed her discreetly, remaining in the hallway. This was her struggle, and she had to win it alone. She opened the door without knocking. My mother-in-law was organizing her day's purchases. She had spent more of my wife's money on fancy items she did not require. My wife spoke in a hard, steely tone that I had never heard her employ before. Pack your belongings. You are leaving now. My mother-in-law turned with her condescending smile, which she had honed over decades. Excuse me. I am not going anywhere. This is just as much my home as yours. I watched the videos, Mom. I witnessed everything. My mother-in-law's smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. I spotted you stealing. I watched you intentionally harm the house. I heard you contacted social services to damage an innocent child. My wife's voice quivered, but not with fear, but with controlled rage, and I saw you shove my daughter into the water. You have no proof of any of that, my mother-in-law protested, but her arrogance had vanished. My wife pulled out her phone and showed her one of the videos. Isn't this proof? My mother-in-law's eyes were filled with fear for the first time in my memory. The fear of someone who has finally realized that her actions have repercussions. You have 2 hours, my wife said. Contact whoever you need to contact, find a place to stay, but after 9 o'clock tonight, I don't want to see you in this house. You can't do this to me. I'm your mother, and a mother doesn't abuse her daughter's children, steal, or lie. My wife took another step closer. You haven't been my mother for a long time. You've been a parasite. My mother-in-law tried one last desperate attack. He's brainwashing you. He recorded those videos to manipulate you. No, my wife responded with a terrifying calm. He installed those cameras to protect our family from you. I stood in the hallway, watching the power shift, and I didn't intervene. There was no need. My wife had found her voice, her backbone, her limit, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope for our marriage. The war was about to end, but the most important victory had already been won. My wife had opened her eyes, and the next day, I witnessed something I never expected to see. My wife, with a glacial calm I didn't know she possessed, was helping her mother pack. There were no screams or pleas, just a heavy silence that seemed to crush the air in the room. My mother-in-law made one last desperate attempt at manipulation, throwing herself on the suite floor and sobbing with a performance she had perfected over decades. "He's turned you against me," she wailed, clutching the hem of my wife's jeans like a toddler. "I'm your mother, you cannot do this to me." My wife paused and gazed down at her. The coldness in her words sent shivers down my spine. "No, you did it, you harmed my daughter, you shoved a youngster into the pool and stole from my own home." She knelt to her mother's level. "It is over." For the first time in my life, I noticed genuine terror in my mother-in-law's eyes. The woman who had ruled my wife for decades realized she had lost all control in an instant. "You have no right," she cried, standing up with urgency she had never displayed. "This house should be mine. I am blood family." Family? My wife stood up, and I saw the powerful lady who had been hiding behind the obedient daughter for years. A family does not pressure its children. A family does not steal. A family does not contact social services to harm innocent people. The mother-in-law played one final card. "You're going to regret this. You are nothing without me. I raised you. I gave you everything. You conditioned me. You manipulated me. You taught me to value your comfort over the health of my own baby." My wife's voice broke, not from weakness, but from liberty. Not anymore. 2 hours later, her sister arrived to bring her up. The anxiety in the air was evident when my sister-in-law came and noticed the baggage. "What really happened?" she inquired directly. I didn't have to answer. My wife handed her her phone, which was playing one of the videos. I watched my sister-in-law's face turn from shock to loathing as she saw her mother take from my desk. "Oh my God, mother. What else have you done?" My mother-in-law tried her last move. "They're fake videos. He manipulated them. But my sister-in-law had already seen enough. Get your things. Let's go." My mother-in-law turned to me with a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over. I'm going to destroy you." I walked up to her and said, in the calmest voice I could muster, "You already tried and you lost." The next morning my wife's phone was constantly vibrating with text messages and Facebook notifications from her friends, neighbors, and distant cousins. I thought that was the end of the war, but I was mistaken. The war had only changed the battlefields. "How could you abandon your own mother? Your mother is devastated." My mother-in-law had launched her nuclear bomb, painting herself as a frail, elderly woman, unjustly kicked out by a controlling son-in-law and a brainwashed daughter. She claims her son-in-law manipulated you into hating her. "I saw your mother's post and how awful. I'm praying for her." I watched my wife read the post, her face a mask of fury and pain, and I feared the old doubt would return, but then she looked up and met my gaze with steely eyes. She talked about how she only wanted to reunite the family, and how her heart was broken. She didn't mention the theft, the call to social services, or the pool incident. She was the ideal victim. I'm sure many of you have seen my mother's post, but I'd like you to watch this first, because the facts speak for themselves. Instead of responding to the post or starting a comment war, she did something much smarter. She formed a WhatsApp group with key family members and sent a single message to them. She attached the videos of the theft, the sabotage, and the audio of the call to social services. Then, with a terrifying calm, she posted a single public comment under her mother's post. "Mom, it breaks my heart that you've chosen to make this public with a version so far from reality. The decision we made was the hardest of my life, and it was to protect my daughter." The mother-in-law's post was exposed for what it was, a lie, and the tone of the messages changed within hours. The family, now armed with irrefutable evidence, took our side. Shortly after, we noticed that my mother-in-law had deleted her post, unable to bear the humiliation. Her last weapon had blown up in her face, and she was now completely alone. That night, my wife did something that showed me that the healing had truly begun. She took an old velvet box from the closet, which contained a pile of jewelry rings, bracelets, and a pearl necklace. "What is this?" I asked. "It's the jewelry my mother gave me," she said, her voice firm. "Every piece came with a condition, a favor with a string attached. They aren't gifts, they're shackles." The next day, we went to a pawn shop together, and we sold everything. We didn't want to keep anything that reminded us of that venomous snake. With the money, we planned our next family vacation. That afternoon, we sat down with our daughter. "Remember how you've always wanted to go to the amusement park in Orlando?" my wife remarked. "And how Grandma always said it was a waste of time and money?" My daughter nodded, a shadow of sadness in her eyes. "Well," my wife continued, taking her hands. "Grandma was incorrect. Dreams are not a waste of time. They are the most significant aspect. And we're going on our next trip. How does that sound?" My daughter's eyes grew like saucers, brimming with tears of surprise and joy. The mother-in-law's special malice, which had not only ostracized her but also mocked her wishes, was being destroyed and used as fuel to realize those precise ambitions. That night, as my daughter slept, my wife looked at me and said, "My mother was slowly stealing our happiness. Now it's time to reclaim it." And for the first time in years, my house felt like the home it was always supposed to be. A few months later, the war's echoes faded. We transformed her old guest suite, the Viper's Nest, into a family movie theater. Nights of screaming and tension were replaced by popcorn-filled movie marathons. Our daughter's laughter was the sole sound in the corridor. A phone call revealed the true conclusion. It was my sister-in-law. My wife moved away to converse, and when she returned, her expression was a muddled mix of sadness and relief. She sat next to me in silence for a long time. "What happened?" I inquired calmly. She took a deep breath. "It was my sister. She could not take it anymore. The lies and deception, attempting to turn her against her own husband. It followed the same old pattern." She halted and glanced at me. "They had her committed. Mom is currently in a nursing facility." The news landed in the room like a stone. There was no celebration, no joy, only the weight of an unavoidable conclusion. My wife's voice broke as she continued. "My sister and I will pay half and half. It's the best place they could find, but that's how she lives today." I held her tightly. "You did not put her there," I whispered. "She built the road herself, brick by brick." As a final act of closure, my wife tore up the 3 unopened letters her mother had sent her a few days before. Our daughter, free of the shadow of condemnation, has grown into a more confident, louder, and happier youngster. One night, my wife took my hands and whispered something that both broke and healed me. "My family consists of only you and her. Forgive me for taking so long to see it. Now I'd like to ask you. What would you have done in my place? Was I overly severe, or should I have responded sooner?" Edit. We fulfilled our commitment. We traveled to Orlando last month. When I saw my daughter meet her favorite characters and scream with joy on every ride, I knew we had truly won. She knelt to her mother's level. "It's over." For the first time in my life, I noticed genuine terror in my mother-in-law's eyes. The woman who had ruled my wife for decades realized she had lost all control in an instant. "You have no right," she cried, standing up with urgency she had never displayed. "This house should be mine. I'm blood family." "Family?" My wife stood up, and for the first time, I saw the strong woman who had been hiding for years behind the obedient daughter. "A family doesn't push children. A family doesn't steal. A family doesn't call social services to hurt innocent people." The mother-in-law played one final card. "You're going to regret this. You're nothing without me. I raised you. I gave you everything. You conditioned me. You manipulated me. You taught me to prioritize your comfort over the well-being of my own daughter." My wife's voice broke. Not from weakness, but from liberty. "Not anymore." 2 hours later, her sister arrived to bring her up. The anxiety in the air was evident when my sister-in-law came and noticed the baggage. "What really happened?" she inquired directly. I didn't have to answer. My wife handed her a phone with one of the videos playing. I watched my sister-in-law's face turn from shock to loathing as she saw her mother take from my desk. "Oh my God, Mom, what else have you done?" My mother-in-law tried her final move. "They're fake videos. He manipulated them." However, my sister-in-law had already seen enough. "Get your things, let's go." My mother-in-law gave me a look of utter loathing. "This isn't over. I'm going to destroy you." I walked up to her and, in the calmest voice I could summon, stated, "You already tried and lost. Now leave." I assumed that was it. I was mistaken. The conflict had just shifted the battlefields. The next morning, my wife awoke to her phone vibrating non-stop. It was text messages and Facebook updates from her friends, neighbors, and distant cousins. How could you throw your own mother out on the street? Your mom is heartbroken. She says her son-in-law manipulated you into hating her. I saw your mother's post. How awful. I'm praying for her. My mother-in-law had launched a nuclear weapon. She had put a lengthy, sad story on her Facebook profile, a masterpiece of fabrication. She portrayed herself as a fragile, elderly woman who was unfairly booted out by her domineering son-in-law and indoctrinated daughter. She expressed how she merely wanted to reunite the family, and how her heart was torn. She made no mention of the theft, the call to social services, or the pool incident. She was a wonderful victim. My wife read the post with a furious and pained expression on her face. For a brief moment, I feared the old doubt might resurface, but she looked up and met my gaze with steely determination. The time for being quiet is over, she remarked. She did not respond to the post. She did not begin a comment war. She did something far smarter. She made a WhatsApp group for essential family members and sent a single message. I know many of you have seen my mother's post. Before anything else, I ask you to watch this. The facts speak for themselves. She sent footage of the theft and sabotage, as well as audio of the call to social services. Then, with scary calm, she left a single public comment beneath her mother's post. Mom, it breaks my heart that you've chosen to make this public with a version so far from reality. The decision we made was the hardest of my life, and it was to protect my daughter. I'm not going to engage in a war here. Our close family already knows the whole truth. It was checkmate. The mother-in-law's post was exposed as what it was. A lie. Within hours, the tone of the communications had shifted. The pals who attacked her have since written to apologize. The family, now equipped with indisputable proof, joined our cause. Shortly after, we realized my mother-in-law had erased her post, unable to take the embarrassment. Her last weapon had exploded in her face. Now she was entirely alone. That night, my wife did something to show me that the healing process had begun. She removed an old velvet box from the closet. Inside, there was a collection of jewels, including rings, bracelets, and a pearl necklace. What's this? I inquired. It's the jewelry my mother gave me, she explained, her voice steely. Every piece came with a condition, with a favor, with a string attached. They aren't gifts. They're shackles. The following day we went to a pawn shop together. We sold every item. We did not want to keep anything that reminded us of the dangerous snake. With the money, we planned our next family holiday. That afternoon, we sat with our daughter.
Yeah.
Remember how you've always wanted to go to the amusement park in Orlando? My spouse asked me. And remember how Grandma always said it was a waste of time and money? My daughter nodded, a hint of melancholy in her eyes. Well, my spouse said as she raised her hands. Grandma was wrong. Your dreams are not a waste of time. They are the most important thing. And we're going on our next vacation. How does that sound? My daughter's eyes grew like saucers, brimming with tears of surprise and joy. The mother-in-law's special malice, which had not only excluded but also belittled her wishes, was being destroyed and used as fuel to accomplish those precise goals. That night, as my daughter slept, my wife looked at me and said, "My mother was slowly stealing our happiness. Now it's time to reclaim it." And for the first time in years, my house felt like the home it was always supposed to be. A few months later, the war's echoes faded. We converted the old guest suite, her previous viper's nest, into a family movie theater. Nights of screaming and tension were replaced by popcorn-filled movie marathons. Our daughter's laughter was the sole sound in the corridor. A phone call revealed the true conclusion. It was my sister-in-law. My wife moved away to converse, and when she returned, her expression was a muddled mix of sadness and relief. She sat next to me in silence for a long time. "What happened?" I inquired calmly. She took a deep breath. "It was my sister. She couldn't take it anymore, the lies, the manipulation, trying to turn her against her own husband. It was the same old pattern." She glanced at me for a moment. "They had her committed. Mom is in a nursing home." The news landed in the room like a stone. There was no celebration, no joy, only the weight of an unavoidable conclusion. "My sister and I will pay half and half," my wife said, her voice quivering. "It's the best place they could find, but that's her life now." I held her tightly. "You didn't put her there," I said. "She built that road herself, brick by brick." As a final act of closure, my wife tore up the 3 unopened letters her mother had sent her a few days before. Our daughter, free of the shadow of condemnation, has grown into a more confident, louder, and happier youngster. One night, my wife took my hands and whispered something that both broke and healed me. "My family is you and her. No one else. Forgive me for taking so long to see it. Now I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Was I too harsh, or should I have acted sooner? Edit. We fulfilled our commitment. We traveled to Orlando last month. When I saw my daughter meet her favorite characters and scream with joy on every ride, I knew we had truly won.